Freakiness is a part of life. Original Barman along with the two bad, wicked youths of rap. Not a mercy, whoa.
What's the business? Talk paper when I'm riding by. They know it's drizzle, he the truth off the east side. I know who ain't got my money because they ducking high. I grind for me and mine. I got the green light. I got to get it how I live it. That means front line. I got them zips, I got that soft, I got that hard white. I got that.
Well, hello guys. How are we doing? Comment t'appelles-tu? Hold on. Get this camera bullcrap going. All right. My name's Jeep Grand Cherokee, and welcome to my channel. This is, of course, your host, whoever I just said I was. Please remember to like, comment, share, and participate in this stream. If you're new here, all right, if you're a new student, you haven't gotten syllabus, you haven't done your GCSEs, you haven't done your IA, there's still a chance for you to interact with the master. I'm not the master, but if I was, you could interact with me. You will, of course, have the opportunity to come into this channel. That's right, this very place, and you can voice your opinion, no matter how large, no matter how small, no matter how stupid your opinion is. I will allow it on this channel. Exceptions being blasphemy, and that's kind of it, really. I mean, otherwise, you can say whatever you want. You're talking about Coke Zero. You want to talk about Diet Coke, right? You want to talk about defilement of the bedroom? Do whatever you want, but do not blaspheme. We have the chat here. I'm going to open that up in a minute. Let me try to get some more light in this little litter box because I'm in a new room today. So give me a second, boys. Oh. Hey. Oh. What's up? All right. So I am back and I have more light. So that's always a good thing. Let me increase that a little bit. Ooh, mama. That's bright. All right. Let's read some stuff. Fire intro. I am aware, but thank you very much. I want to change the design here. I've been doing primary blue forever. We'll do red for now. A little red Jeep episode. Thank you very much for that. Have a few of our regulars here, unfortunately. Kidding. You know who you are. Molliporium Jeep. All right. Nectarinos, Jim the man. Damn, Jim on fire with streams, says the resident crook. Manuel, the Jim is live. Caravaggio, young Jimmy. Careful not to switch it that way or you're flipping off British people. Hello again. Right. Katie has finally managed to not miss the stream. Francais. All right. Emilian. Great to see you, Emilian. Yeah, please like it. All right. You're not allowed to comment. You can't say jack crap unless you will be liking and commenting on the stream. Oh, the hat's too much? Give me a second then. Wow. Things are suddenly different. Yeah, the hat is radiating. Okay. So today's subject matter is going to be regarding oh, I know how I can turn on the light stuff a little. That's better. A bit? I mean, I don't know. I'm not in my usual habitat today. Whatever. Who cares? I'll radiate a bit. I'm not going to be the entire screen anyway. We're going to start with a couple pictures here. And we need to talk about history. And that's right. Somebody said something about the French. I'm sorry. We got to bring up Gaul. We got to bring up the Franks. All right. So parlay a little petit français, okay? We're going to do a little bit of the Gauls, and then I have to focus on the Greeks and Kievan Rus and theology. So there's a few things to cover. If you're new to my channel, you don't know what on earth is going on, I highly recommend you watch some of my previous streams. I've talked about a variety of topics, and I don't feel like going into those same topics over and over. I shouldn't have to re-describe the system of morality that I've proven on this channel. And it's not even about me having some niche position, because that would be one thing. Anyone can prove a niche position. But what I intend to show people is rather, I don't know, give me a second. Is that better? Whatever. I will rather my position here is to show that belief in what I'm talking about is in fact not a position. It is in fact just the reality. So the title of this stream is The History of Christian Warfare, comma, the Heresy of Pacifism. Okay, so we're not just going to be talking about why pacifism is heretical theologically. We're going to talk about why it doesn't make sense historically. So you guys understand historically. There's a vast difference here between what really happens and then what happens in theoretical, hypothetical physics. Okay, we're not in the realm of theoretical, hypothetical physics today. Are we? Are we? No. So one thing that I like to make very clear on my channel, and I'm just kind of riffing a little till we get more viewers, is there is a great difference between, let's just make it full screen for now. There is a great difference between theology and theologians. And I do not think, I'm not a theologian. I'm a guy on the internet who none of you have met. I may be fictitious. I could be AI. Who knows? I could have been Sicilian the whole time and I hoodwinked all of you. But the point is, I'm just a guy. I'm not a theologian. And I'm not meaning to disrespect some of the good theologians throughout church history. But the truth of the matter is that theology is the study of God. And God is not beholden to theologians. It's the other way around. So the religion that God creates, he creates so that all of man can follow it. Due to that, not everybody can be a theologian. More importantly, not everybody can or should read very complex theology. And then on top of that, sometimes things happen in the history of a religion that the theologians might disagree with, but it happens anyway. And why does that occur? Because of the nature of man, yes, but also because of the reality of this world. Some theologians throughout history I have critiqued for not being part of the world and for spending too much time in whatever tower or cave they were writing their dissertations and not interacting with the world. Now, I'm not talking about monks, because monks, for the most part, didn't sit around just doing theology. They were doing manual labor, praying, hosting liturgy. They had a busy life. They didn't really have time to write these 10,000-page dissertations on philosophy. So really, it's people who live near other people, but still retreated from the real world. Now, I've seen many people critique Christianity and say, oh, you know, the Bible says that the religion we're supposed to follow is a worldly religion. You know, we do things in the world. You're supposed to protect your family. You're supposed to do this. You're supposed to do that. You know, it's not all about going away into the desert and just closing yourself off from civilization. To which I would say agree, but disagree at the same time. There are times when it is appropriate to get away from the corruption of the world. And it doesn't matter what dominion you believe in. Sometimes it's inescapable, and you have to do that. There are some people who are called to be monks. But for those who are not, which is the average person, yeah, Christianity doesn't teach that the average married couple should be running away from the reality of the world and living in the desert. That's not at all what it says. That's something that a single practical person can do. But the flip side, so we're not talking about monasticism here. The flip side is that when you have too much of an obsession with a refined theology that is almost like a biochemical and not actually dealing with what the effect of that is in the real world, then you end up with a theology or with a warped understanding of theology that doesn't match the world. So throughout all of history, men had to fight to keep themselves, their loved ones, and their nation safe. So there may be theologians that say you can never do violence to anybody, even in self-defense, even if some guy's coming at you with a knife. I hate to break it to you, but some of that is due to the fact that that man or woman writing that had not been in a situation where they were in a military position and the responsibility of the survival or collapse of their entire nation was at stake. So dealing with a guy mugging you is a lot different than fighting for the kingdom of God. Also, a lot of the early theologians we've already discussed, particularly in the eastern half, so in Asia Minor, of the first 200 years of Christianity, are living in a world where they didn't ever perceive a possibility that there would be an empire where the majority of people eventually become Christian, and then that empire spreads Christianity. For all they knew, Christianity would always be a small religion. It would grow, but it would always be small and obscure. And so in order to keep the peace, since you're living in a pagan land, you're not going to want to declare jihad on everybody. And so what they were saying was very appropriate for its time. It does not apply to military commanders and military leaders who have to defend their state. Because in the Battle of Tours, which I'm showing here on this screen, Charles Martel, he's not just a guy defending some dudes. This is a Christian warrior defending a Christian land. So when you're doing violence to people who are trying to destroy the land of your covenant, being Christianity, you have the right to destroy them, because you have to do that to keep that land safe. So as we talked about in the previous stream, when Christ talks about loving your brother or loving another, what word does he use? Brother, one of your kinsmen, your neighbor. They're always people that are within proximity, your sibling, your family member, and literally, geographically, in Judea, your neighbor. Which, who was that? That was somebody who followed the same God as you. Christ was not telling people to go and tolerate the worship of Poseidon, or as we would say today, atheism and other religions as well. So that doesn't mean that you have to go out of your way to be a violent scumbag and make people's lives miserable. However, if push came to shove, and let's say you live in Maryland, and let's say Maryland, for some reason, is a very pious state in the United States, and an army, such as in the Battle of Tours, a Muslim army or a rabbinic army or any such army, is invading it with the intent to slaughter some of your people and then convert that land away, you have the right, and not just the right, but the duty to do that. And throughout history, you're never going to find an example where another religion invades a Christian land and everyone goes, oh, sorry guys, we believe in the New Testament, I guess we just can't do anything. That doesn't take place, I'm sorry, until the Industrial Revolution. So the only people until the Industrial Revolution that believed in full-on pacifism, and I wouldn't even say it was really pacifism, but just believed in not taking the violent approach, even in self-defense, were monks, because the monks became, most of the time, members of clergy that had to hold liturgy, so they couldn't be running around slashing people, and they didn't want to. They wanted to live a peaceful life. And number two, people living in the first 1 to 2 centuries where they never imagined there would be such a thing as a Christian state or a Christian community. Not even just a state, but a community. You have to understand that Christianity didn't start out in one geographical area and then, they built this huge, city of Christians and they slowly started to grow. No, it was spread out across the entirety of the old world. So around the Mediterranean basin, North Africa and Europe especially, and then parts of Asia, they were intermixed, and usually they were like 5 to 10% of the population. But you didn't live in a Christian neighborhood. You just lived in a neighborhood with whatever pagans you happen to live with, and goodness forbid you get caught being Christian. So those types of people would not have been talking about self-defense and violence because there was no good that would ever come from that, and they didn't perceive a world where that would be appropriate. As time progresses, the reality changes. So reality changes, and the church, doesn't have to adapt to social standards, as certain churches have said, but they do have to adapt to a physical reality. And an invading army who wants to decapitate your priests, burn your churches, and destroy your land, I'm sorry, but you gotta fight them, or you're not a Christian. End of story. So unless you're a priest, or a child, or some old woman, or a monk, you should fight these people. And even priests and monks have been known in the past not just to partake in warfare, but to lead the warfare itself. Thank you very much for Super Chat from an old friend of mine, Emilian. We've been buds for a while. Awesome guy. Definitely big love. Thank you very much for the $20 USD Super Chat. He says, don't forget to like and share, thumbs up, and Orthodox cross emoji. Let's read a couple comments, and then we go back into the subject at hand, because I ain't even close to being done. Hayden says, question, would you say that other than Israel, would England have fought perhaps the most amount of just wars? There were a lot of, this is a great question actually. There were a lot of just wars, and I know you guys can't see me in the video thing, but you can ignore that for now. There were a lot of just wars that England fought. Everybody likes to, like I said in the West was not barbaric stream. It's really hip now to shit on the West. And one of those points of modernism is, in fact, trying to be an extreme ortho-bro type who hates everything that's ever come out of the West. You can critique a lot of stuff in the West. There's many things that I detest about elements of Western history, but you can't just hate the West and think everything a Westerner has done has always been the excrement of vermin, for example. So if you read the British Empire, you read stories from the British Empire and their works. I'm not even talking about Christian England in the medieval period, but even up until World War I, a lot of the wars that Britain fought were very just. You have the invasion of Sudan. If you look at Sudan at that time period, the Anglo-Egyptian invasion of Sudan, first of all, the Egyptians are helping the British. So it's not just like some white dude shows up and wants to slaughter Africans. That wasn't the case. But secondly, there was a really strange fanatical cult growing in Sudan that threatened its neighbors. And so Winston Churchill's autobiography, The River War, can give you a lot of information on that topic. Not going to get further into that. In terms of Christian England, I would say that most of the wars fought in that would be just. The Holy League, even some of the Venetians did pretty just wars. The Greek Revolution against the Ottomans, the Russian conquest of Eurasia, the Balkan Christian Orthodox defense, and then later revolt against the Ottomans. Those are all examples of just wars. So I don't even necessarily think you have to use St. Augustine's definition. He was giving his own idea of it. He himself wasn't a soldier, but he was pretty on point. All right, so this is the Battle of Tours. We're going to move on a little bit. So moving on, still in the domain of Gaul, this is Charlemagne. How did Charlemagne spread his religion? And what was Charlemagne's religion? Now, if you ask an Orthodox, he's going to say pre-schism Orthodox Christianity. If you ask a Catholic, he'll say Catholicism. I think the answer is somewhere in between. He was living in the time period when you were starting to notice some changes in the Latin side, between the Latin and the Greek side of theology. So you could, if you're Catholic, you're not totally otherworldly crazy to say that Charlemagne was part of the Catholic faith, but the Orthodox can say the same. It was just a very blurred time period. But Charlemagne, how did he spread? What did he do, first of all? He spread Catholicism throughout Western and Central Europe, and even into Eastern Europe as well. Some of his followers did. How did he end up doing that if he just believed in pacifism? He didn't. Now, was Charlemagne like mentally stupid or something? He just couldn't understand the Bible? No. Even if he was illiterate, he had many of the top brass clergy, theologians, even popes corresponding with him and telling him what the theology was. And they never told him that the theology of the Catholic Church is about rolling over and letting people do paganism and Islam and Judaism and just letting people destroy you. It's counterintuitive. Charlemagne waged many wars, and if you read the Old Testament, there are many times when you have kings, both of Judea and even pagan kings, are commended by God sometimes, not in terms of, oh, they're righteous people, but hey, for a pagan, it's not, he can be useful here. And so kings are not called evil. They can be evil, but kings in general are not called evil. Armies in general are not called evil. And God commands Judea to defend itself against the Greeks in the Maccabean Wars, against the Syrians in Chronicles, and he does offensive war in the book of Numbers against absolute pure evil. But many of the wars are defensive. Then the New Testament, you don't see Christ saying that warfare as a general is bad. He says those that live by the sword will die by the sword. What does that mean? What does it mean to live by the sword? It means to be somebody who always, their first instinct is to choose violence. So the disciple choosing violence as the first resort, that was criticized. But in the same gospel, Christ says to sell your cloak and buy a sword. So you have to have some kind of defense. So defense is not wrong. And a Christian empire emulating itself off of what's found in the Old Testament, declaring war or defending violently its land from foreigners who want to destroy their religion, would not be against anything that Christ said there. What Christ is saying is, do not be an overly violent individual. And so that doesn't even have to do with the topic of warfare. It has to do with the topic of loving violence, loving death, loving blood, loving slaughtering people. So you don't even have to be in war to do that. There are people who are murderers. There are people who slaughter. There are people who want to take out their vengeance violently. Oh, you stole a chicken of mine, I'm going to cut everybody's head off. There were people like that, and there are people like that. So remember, just because you live in your post-industrial Western world with air conditioning and technology, and you don't have to worry about these matters that much, people in the rest of the world can get desperate, and in desperate times go to violence. And Christ is saying, do not live by that violent code. Strive for peace in all situations, and if peace is not an option, you have to defend yourself. I'm going to read some comments. At Jeem, better position would be to hate secularism than the Latin West. The West in its original sense died a long time ago. There's no state that had theocratic laws in the West or the East for that matter. Well, what do you mean? In all of human history? Because they did have theocratic laws, but there's a distinction in Christianity between the secular affairs of the government and then kind of the rule of the clergy. So what is the religion doing? What is part of actual the laity have to follow the religion versus here's a law on taxes. That doesn't really have much to do with religion per se. So I would disagree there were theocratic states, but not in the last couple of centuries for sure. You saw some more of them in the East, particularly the Tsardom of Russia is as close to kind of secular ruler, but with a religious government and a religious society that you could get, at least in the last couple hundred years. I would agree that the greatest enemy to Christianity ended up being the Enlightenment and agnosticism and secularism. So that does need to be combated first. That's kind of it. This Greg guy says pretty much the same thing every stream, so I'm just going to move on. We covered these two images. All right, here's another example of something that may be considered moral and people might not like. The Russian conquest of Tatarstan, the conquest of the Tatar people and the rest of Siberia and Eurasia by the Russians would be considered justified. Because number one, these people didn't follow their religion. Number two, they had been raiding them. And number three, the command of the gospel is to spread the religion to the four corners of the world. And if people don't want to follow it and they're obstinate and they violently oppose you, a Christian empire has the right to declare war on them. And for the most part, aside from the Circassian unfortunate events that, I'm sure many of you are aware of, the Russian Empire was actually pretty tame in its dealings with people in Siberia and Central Asia even as well. So they ruled with an iron fist, but they didn't go out of their way to be unnecessarily cruel, except for the Circassians. So that's the whole point. That's the whole point of the understanding here, that there are moments when this kind of behavior can be justified. Now, we do have a comment here from Putin Trump. Charlemagne was criticized by Aquin for his excessive violence against the pagan Saxons, and was given many penances for that. Yeah, see, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Don't do an overgeneralization. Violence is sometimes okay. Excessive violence is not okay. So we don't believe in a religion where there's absolutely no limit to the violence you can do. Don't do this horseshoe extremism stuff where you hear one guy tell you to be pacifist, then you run over to Gene's channel and I tell you not to be pacifist, so now you're just going to cut off everybody's head and piss down their neck. That's not what's being taught either. There's a level of violence that's acceptable. That acceptable amount is not zero, but it depends on the situation. And there is a level of violence that's unacceptable. And you can be too violent, and you can kill too many people, and you can conquer too much land too fast, and you can force beliefs down people's throat in a way that they don't convert out of the goodness of their hearts. So there you go. Why do we have kings when God didn't want a king and advised against it? Because God didn't want man to be evil and bad, and yet man is still in many ways evil and bad. God has wanted us to sin, and we still sin. And so in many situations, a king is necessary for a people to thrive as civilization. Now, God said he didn't want the Israelites to have a king because he said he would be their king. So understand that he was going to rule their theocracy directly. God never said he's going to rule the theocracy of the Hittites or the Egyptians or the Midianites or the Greeks or anybody else or the Romans. So their customs and their civilization could still be salvaged and melded with Christianity rather than just, hey, let's erase everything and pretend that we're Israelites. The Romans and Greeks don't have to become Israelites, but they do have to accept the one God, the God of Abraham. They have to stop idolatry, and they have to live a life in accordance with the scripture and what they were taught. Now, God does not say, like I said, to the Hindus or to anybody else that he's going to kill all their kings and then he becomes their king. The Israelites had a special contract with God, which, by the way, they abhorred and betrayed multiple times, and God punishes them for that. The Greeks and Romans were not under such a covenant with God. And in the new covenant, we're not under such a covenant where God is actively looking at every single action you're doing. And if your kingdom, there is no really kingdom because the new covenant is so many uncountable nations that happen to all be Christian. Some of them recognize each other, some of them don't. There is no one government, this is the Christian government, that could possibly be ruled by God in that way. It's a completely different situation. It's a good comment, but it's a completely different situation. Once again, to Crooks says, once again, there's a middle ground to all this, and it's not the golden mean fallacy for once. Learn to draw the line. Don't be unhinged. It's simple, but a question for many. Exactly. And so that's why we're studying this. And if you read my book, you'll also see there's many citations I give. It's not just Latins. Everybody thinks, oh, St. Augustine invented just war. The Latins, they loved war. The East, the Greek East, and the Copts are all a bunch of pacifists. So the real original Eastern Christianity is just a pacifist religion, and they hate being tough, and it's just totally different. It's all about mysticism. That's not true. I've given you guys many citations from St. Basil, St. Gregory of Nyssa, and then as you go further, St. Philaret of Moscow. I've given you advice, even as recently as just a decade ago. One of the popes of the Coptic Orthodox, Oriental Orthodox Church, says the very same thing that I've been saying, that you love your personal enemies, you don't love evil, you don't love God's enemies. So that's not just some ancient thing that's been forgotten. It's upheld today, and it's not just a modern thing. I can trace it all the way into the Middle Ages, the medieval times, and way before that into the earliest church fathers in the first 200 to 300 years as well. So this idea that, oh, the East didn't believe in this stuff, that's completely irrelevant and not true whatsoever. I've proven without a doubt they believe in the exact same things. St. Augustine didn't invent just war. He coined the term. And St. Augustine told people, read the fathers before me. Don't turn me into an Elohim. Don't make me the only saint. And don't build a church just on me, St. Augustine. All right, I'm going to look at another example. So if we look at this one right here, right, this is, again, an extension of the Tatar, the conquest of the Russians. So you have the Grand Principality of Moscow, you have the Golden Horde, Nogai Horde, Uzbek Khanate, a variety of other places, the Khanate of Kazan, Novgorod, Kiev and Rus, etc. These places are all, eventually, they all are just part of Russia today. But the Caucasus for a long time wasn't part of Russia. And it's not an insignificant amount of territory. It's a huge amount of territory. And the Golden Horde had used the Caucasus, as well as Central Asia, to pour in and destroy Russia. And so they caused havoc on Russia for a while. So Russia's expansion, and the reason Russia is such a massive, probably too large of a country today, is because they continued to conquer places so that their people wouldn't be under threat. And they ended up just having the power to keep conquering and conquering anyway, increasing the life quality and development of these places. Now, it depends on the area. Everything west of the Urals got a lot more attention, as did the Caucasus, and parts of southern Russia compared to like Siberia, where barely any people live. But the point is, the Russians didn't eradicate everybody. You have many ethnicities living in Russia today that are not just Slavs. So you have Russian Slavs, and you have different Slavs as well living there. You have like Finno-Ugaric or whatever people, people from the Caucasus, Central Asians, and a variety of other groups, Turkic groups, Mongolic groups, etc. They all live there. None of them were erased, but they're under the dominion and the banner of an Orthodox Christian country, at least in name. So that's the understanding. And great example right here. Will the Reconquista be mentioned? Great example of Christian warfare, especially in the earlier phases. Thank you very much for bringing it up. I will bring up the Reconquista in a moment. Here's an example of something I want to show you guys as well. So if you look here, it's artistic rendition of the Greek Revolution against the Ottoman Empire. You can clearly see a member of clergy holding a white flag with a cross, and even though he's not decapitating anybody in this photo or this picture, he's clearly part of the cause, and the cause is holy and the cause is just in his eyes. Now, if you say, well, this is just art, Gene, aren't you kind of like pulling something out of your hat? No, because if you look at my chapter against pacifism, Marcionism, etc., and loving your enemies, in my book, I give you a variety of quotes, not just from Egypt and not just from a theologian, but from a historian who saw these things happening in real life. So during the Mountain Wars, where the Lebanese Maronite Catholics fought against the Druze, and then that spilled over into this insane sectarian fighting in Damascus as well, the Colonel Charles Churchill, who's there, I have this book, it's out of print, you can't buy it today, but I did give the citations, says quite clearly that the Maronite Patriarch at the time, the very highest Maronite in the entire world, said, this is a holy war, so be sure when you're fighting to eradicate your enemy, except for the women and the children, and to destroy their possessions. This was the Patriarch of the Maronite Catholic, the Maronite Rite of the Catholic Church. This is in the late 1800s. This is not 1,000 years ago. And he's saying this while being part of the Catholic Church, having never been excommunicated. You then have a Melkite Patriarch saying the same thing. If the Druze make a move against us, we shall go and totally eradicate them. This is a priest saying that. Now, does the priest mean he's going to go there and he's going to lop people with a sword? No. But he's saying our people, the Melkite Catholics, and our cousins, the Maronite Catholics, if we have a threat of being attacked by another religion and they want to wipe us out, we will wipe them out first. And that was an exact quote that I've given you. Well, I didn't give it exactly, but I mean, that is a citation that I can give you guys. Now, if we look at, I already talked about the Circassian genocide. I said that that is an example of going way too far. Give me a second. Totally forgot to get images up for this one. Wow, that's a pretty terrible map. Yeah, whatever. Okay, I have some more images for you guys. Sorry about that. It took me a moment, but it was well worth. Yeah. So for the example of the Reconquista, this was mentioned here. So the legend in the bottom right says what years the reconquest of Iberia took place in. So the final strip where Granada is didn't happen until the late 1400s, but the beginning of the Reconquista started as early as the 900s. So the 900s, already like a quarter of Spain was reclaimed. Then in the next 40 years, a substantial portion, a thin but substantial portion of Spain is reclaimed. And then in the century after that, another massive amount is reclaimed. So really, in the first century of the Reconquista, they take back half of Spain. Some people say, oh, it took them like 900 years to get their land back. That wasn't in succession. In the first 100 years, they got half of Spain back. Then there was a little bit of a break. Then they got another massive chunk. And then it took them kind of another 200 years to get the very last part where the highest population density of the Muslimin were there in Spain. But for most of the Reconquista time period, they had like half, or in some periods, 2/3 of Spain back in their control. So it didn't take 1,000 years to do that. But in the topic of the Reconquista, that is an example of Christian violence that's totally acceptable. The Catholic Church promulgated this, and the Franks, it says Francos right there, they're the ones who inspired this. So at first, when Iberia was conquered, the first 150-ish years, nobody really wanted to rise up against the Muslimin. They didn't know how to, they didn't have the inspiration. But the high development of France, which I was talking about in my stream on the myth of the barbaric West, gave these people the opportunity and the inspiration by emulating the Franks to retake their homeland. And yeah, it took them some time, but they ended up doing it. So that's an example of something that's perfectly allowed. And then you also have, there's another rendition of, I don't know what that is, to be honest. Interesting photo, but not really what I was looking for. Point is, you also have the conquest of the New World by the conquistadors, which, many theologians said, hey, they're going too harsh. They're enslaving these people. They're killing too many people. So they did critique the mode in which some of the conquest was being done. But they didn't say, oh, it was a bad thing that anybody ever came here, and it was a bad thing that they destroyed the Aztec Empire. They didn't say it was a bad thing they destroyed the Aztec Empire. So as a matter of fact, you'd be completely ahistorically inaccurate and hopelessly confused if you think being a Christian means to do pacifism. So I just can't find a time period until after the Enlightenment where people start saying, oh, look at that. I have technology and air conditioning, and I can go to the grocery store now. So I don't need to do violence. Therefore, pacifism is good. So Christians living in France, outside of major metro areas, may never encounter anybody who has a problem with their faith, and they may think, oh, pacifism is super easy. Why doesn't everybody just do this? But Christians in parts of Russia, especially in the Middle East, especially in West Africa and Central Africa, and in parts of Latin America, may feel and experience other groups trying to take them on. And what are they supposed to do in that situation? Absolutely nothing? No. They know that realistically that's not the case. And you can see in the persecution of Christians in Nigeria, Christians aren't even a minority. They're about half of the country. But the ones who happen to live on the border of the north and in the far north end up getting horrible treatment by some of the Muslims in that country. And you can see that this horrible idea of pacifism has negatively impacted and ruined many of their lives, because these people attack them and then they don't fight back because they think, oh, everything's in God's hands, and for me to fight back, I wouldn't be loving my enemy. I got to love my enemy. Oh, my whole family's dead, right? So that was never the intention of Scripture or of the church, and throughout history, the church never behaved that way. So I'm sorry, if you're a pacifist, you're going to basically just have to say that for like 1800 years, everybody was doing Christianity wrong except the monks. And that's just not going to fly, because the Bible says that everybody's supposed to follow this religion, not just a handful of monks, not just people sitting in Thomas Aquinas' classroom, but people out there in the world as well. All right. He said this was before Tours. Yeah, I'm not saying that all of the people who fought against the Muslimin only did so with the help of the Franks. I'm saying the momentum, beginning in the 800s and onwards, was propelled by some of the developments that happened in Western Europe. So the mode and the impressive, admirable growth of the Franks and their warfare against their enemies was an inspiration. Does not mean that there's not any exceptions to that. I'm going to open up the chat, and that's it. Greg, I'm sorry, man. You can talk about whatever you want, but it just does not seem like anybody is biting the bullet here. Let's read this. In my country, once they know that you're Christian, they will appeal to the blank argument. Yeah. The number 2. Let's read. If you read the things the natives did, Pedro Cienza de Leon's accounts for Peru, the Spanish were an improvement. Yeah, oh, definitely. I've done streams on this topic. It's not just the Aztecs. Everyone thinks it's the Aztecs. It's not just the Aztecs. It's the Peruvians. It's the Mayans. So I apologize to people who are here watching that may have substantial native ancestry, but you have to come to grips with the fact that some of the practices your ancestors did were garbage. And some of the practices that my ancestors did were garbage. All right. The Canaanites, which I have some Canaanite ancestry, did horrible things to their infants that I can't even repeat on stream. You think I'm proud of that? Absolutely not. So what the Spanish did by conquering the New World was they stopped horrendous evil from occurring, and that in itself is a moral argument for these things to take place. It's not just the Aztecs, the Mayans, Peruvians. There are many groups who did horribly savage things to their children and to other people's children that is completely out of bar, no excuse, and there's never a situation in life where that would be an appropriate way to deal with anything. So that's that. I'm going to open up the chat now. Come in, be civil, do not talk about something completely irrelevant. So have some relevancy. You want to talk about Spain, Russia, whatever, you can, but make it about tonight's topics. We're not going to talk about nonsensical nonsense. The Spanish did go to the Southeast Asia. They went to the Philippines, obviously, but the Portuguese also were in Indonesia. Papua New Guinea is almost majority Catholic due to their presence. And various other places, even Taiwan used to be called Formosa, that was Portuguese. Sri Lanka was Portuguese. Southern India was Portuguese. Mozambique, I believe, Angola. So Portugal conquered a lot of land that wasn't just Brazil. And Spain conquered everything from Mexico down to the kind of South Pole tip, South America. They also conquered the Philippines, like I said, and they reconquered Iberia. And they also conquered parts of Italy and other places. So pretty impressive when you think that they came from almost nothing and then ended up conquering the known world in a way that no one had seen before. So, yeah, as I said, guys, the chat's up. If you all are too busy to join, I don't really mind or care, but it would be great if you guys could come on in and talk. So I pinned it. You guys can join whenever you want, talk about whatever. Yesterday, we had a lot of pretty interesting stuff. So glad that everybody's here. We're talking all about the history of Christian warfare today. My name is Jim. I don't know why so many people are here, but it is pretty awesome that everybody's here. We're talking about how pacifism is, in fact, a heresy that you're not really allowed to believe in. So you can't really believe in pacifism if you are a Christian. I talked about this many times before. You guys can check out my previous stream on the tribal morality of the Bible, which, by the way, there are limits to it. You don't just do whatever the hell you want. I've taken a lot of flack by some people who are in love with their pacifism, but I will pose this challenge to anybody who's listening. Find me examples of non-monks, okay, so not monks, and people not living in the post-industrial time period that possibly could have survived in their world by believing in full-on pacifism. Because I believe it was a heresy meant to weaken Western and Eastern Europe. And for the most part, it was successful. Now, of course, worse things like communism came about, but when you're done with communism and you're picking up the pieces of Christianity, particularly in the East, you have to have a good example of what that means. So, guys, I had the link. You can come in. The link is pinned here. Yeah, good. We have someone. We have a few. Two Crooks. I'm gonna let you get your little piece in right now. Why don't we talk to this crowd that has manifested? And what do you think of today's topic of Christian warfare being a historical fact and pacifism being a heresy?
Right. I believe that it is inevitable that it was a historical fact because I believe this concept applies to other ideologies and belief systems as well. I am pretty sure if there are any Muslims or Jewish people in the comment section, they would say, yes, we might believe something similar in regards to pacifism versus when we draw the line. And even for more secular ideologies like right-wing nationalism that usually posits a my country first argument, they will often find that even if they don't believe in interventionism, there are times in which their country should engage in warfare. So even the most staunch right-winger who doesn't even want to breathe in the direction of another country will find a way to justify war at some point. And for the left wing, who we stereotype with pacifism, even then they would engage in anti-imperialist warfare or anti-fascist warfare whenever they saw fit. And even centrist liberalism with its belief that, the economic issues, those are the most important. When we're all trading with each other, no one wants to engage in warfare. They will still find ways to justify warfare under the grounds that we must prevent this illiberal, anti-free market, pro-authoritarian regime from propping up for the sake of world civilization or whatever.
Yeah,
it is a very universal concept, and I do not think anybody can legitimately hold on to 100% pacifism. But of course, there's a difference between trying to be 100% pacifist, being able to draw the line, and then somebody who believes in this unhinged, we must engage in this dog-eat-dog world where everybody's openly just brutalizing each other for no reason, as if they're like the Decepticons from Transformers or something.
Yeah, so speaking of Transformers, I am going to let Mr. Pontius in, but feel free to stay here in the video. Pontius, what is up and what would you like to talk about?
Hey, what's up? Can you hear me?
No, I can't hear you. Yeah.
All good. I wanted to comment a bit on the conquistadors and their experiences in the Americas. I mean, people without reading the primary sources fail to realize how horrific the things that they saw really were. Like, for example, in the account that I mentioned in that YouTube comment I made earlier by Pedro Ciencio de Leon in Peru, they would find village chiefs that would perform mass rituals, like killing 20 virgins to celebrate, I don't know, like their fathers dying, or for their own funerals. They practiced widespread polygamy. They practiced, sodomy. Some stuff that was, honestly, if you read it, it's very similar to what's mentioned in the Old Testament, like the abominable practices the Canaanites were doing. It's I'm not going to condone everything the Spanish did. They're my ancestors. I'm somebody from Spanish America. But if I was in their positions, coming from Christian society, I would have the exact same reaction.
Yeah. So a lot of the stuff you guys don't understand. So Pontius was saying something about primary sources. So what does that mean? That means reading the accounts of the people who are actually there, and not what some Harvard professor 5,000 years later is conducting out of Jimmy Neutron's brain. Okay, you have to read the actual accounts of the people. Now, some people say, well, it was all propaganda. Not everything in life is propaganda. And if you can't trust a historical source on anything, then we don't even know where we came from. And you can just basically say the Roman Empire was fake, because that could all be propaganda too. Now, propaganda aside, there is some in real life. If you read these primary sources, I can't even describe the stuff that happened. I can't put it on the screen. Read Conquistador by Buddy Levy. That's a great book where he deals with some of the primary sources. And he's a balanced guy. Like, he'll say when the Spaniards go too far. But for the most part, even as you got this secular Western idea going on, he's still pretty apologetic for the Spaniards. He's like, yeah, there's really no way to defend the behavior of these people other than the fact that they either didn't know better or they had a demonic god that they worshipped, which they did. Like, if you read about the stories of the Aztec gods that they worshipped, they were demonic gods. I mean, they weren't elements of the one god. They were demonic gods.
I mean, Jim, if, for example, like in Pedro de Ciencia's account, he literally talks about talking to indigenous chiefs, and they openly tell him, like, oh yeah, we talk to demons, and they tell us this and that, and like these shadowy figures appear to us after we do these rituals. Like, these are people that were under demonic influence, and their behavior, reflected that.
Yeah, these people would be like proud of the stuff that they did. So people are always shocked by that thing. Oh, everyone just wants to worship a god, and we're all the same. It's like, no, they're not the same. Like, some people genuinely don't care about worshiping a god who's just or good. They make pacts with demons. Like, that's how a lot of the pagan world works. I use air quotes because it depends where you are in the world. Pagan can mean totally different things. But a lot of the pagan world, they just thought about making pacts with gods. Like, they didn't revere or love or respect or cherish their gods. They just feared them, or they wanted their help. Like, God of Tenochtitlan, help me. I want to defeat my enemy. Oh, thanks. I'm going to chop up a child and give him to you now. And so that's just how the ritual was. So there's stuff that's much worse than that. Pontius, thank you for hopping in. I do want to move on because there's some other people, if you don't mind. So
yeah, sure.
Anything else to add, or is that it for now?
So your point on the Reconquista was that it's not that there wasn't stuff happening before tours. It's more like the Franks were really like the big momentum, like with Charlemagne, for example, coming into Iberia and kind of like sending Frankish knights down there.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was saying. There were efforts before him, but when he arrived, it was kind of a morale booster, is what a lot of the scholarship says, and it gave them the hope that there is a whole like Christian world waiting for them, and they have the momentum to do this, even if it takes a long time. So they took the model of the Franks and they applied it to themselves, and they did something much more spectacular than what the Franks had done, and ended up becoming a much more powerful empire by the end of it.
Yeah, agreed. Well, thanks for having me on, man.
Yeah, no problem. All right, Pontius is out of here. Thank you for being here. I got a couple more people. Let me try to add them in. We have Joey. What's up?
Hey, can you hear me?
No. Yeah, I can hear you. How's it going?
Okay, hey, yeah, thanks for doing this. I think the point's pretty interesting, and I just have a question. If Christians of the past, if we were pacifists by nature, would Christianity still like be as prevalent? Like, from my understanding of a lot of these holy wars, and also, understanding the Talmud, the Torah, the Quran. A lot of these religions, side to side, they're oil and water. So my belief system is that if Christians of the past were pacifists, I don't think Christians would exist today. So,
and it's also,
I just
go ahead.
okay. No, you go.
I was going to say, it's not just a practical thing. Like, people think if you're new, like if you just showed up, it's not just a practical thing. It's not like, oh, they kind of had to be defensive, but it was against their beliefs. It wasn't against their beliefs. In my previous stream and throughout my book and a variety of other lecture style live streams I've done, I've proven that the enemies that you're supposed to love that Christ talks about, he always uses words like your brother, your people, your tribe. He's not talking about people who hate your God and want to chop off your head and destroy your whole village. So the love is,
I agree.
You create kingdom on
I agree
earth.
what you're saying, bro. Yeah, I agrre. I think that, again, it's oil to water. And I mean, from reading the Bible, men of God, a lot of these guys even belittled and mocked and then killed like the worshiper. If you look at the story of Elijah and Jezebel, like Elijah wasn't like overly respectful and giving the worshipers of Baal hugs. And this goes all the way to the psyops of the past. A lot of people, when I was raised off of history, I was taught that Vlad the Impaler, Vlad Tepes, was a bad person. They made Dracula off of him, and he was terrible. But if you look at what this dude did, it's a giant psyop. He was a Christian warrior. He was thanked by the Pope. Like Romanian Orthodox, they uplift this guy, and it's just like, we've been told to be complete walking vaginas as Christians, especially Protestantism in America. Yeah, it's the salt. If I was a radical Islamicist, I would just see us all as marks. I'd be like, I'm taking over your land and your daughter. Well, and what are you going to do?
That's exactly correct. I will get onto the Islam part in 1 second. I just want to give you guys a piece of scripture here. So you mentioned how like King David and Elijah would mock the worshipers of other gods. Well, here's an example of Christ. He's not, mocking per se, but he's saying some pretty cruel stuff. Because notwithstanding, I have a few things against you, because you suffer that woman Jezebel, which calls herself a prophetess, to teach and seduce my servants to commit fornication and to eat things sacrificed unto idols. I gave her time to repent, and she did not. Behold, I'll cast her into a bed, and them to commit adultery with her into great tribulation, except they repent of their deeds. And I will kill her children with death. And all the churches shall know that I am he who searches the reins and the hearts. And that's kind of a paraphrase of Jeremiah 17. So Christ himself, who's supposed to be this like teddy bear, and if you're like a rural girl from Tennessee, he's supposed to be your boyfriend. No, apparently that son of God that you think is your boyfriend is saying some pretty cruel things to idolaters and blasphemers.
So I have a question. This is like a recent thing for me. I'm just getting deep into my, trying to get deeper into my faith. God found me. It's a blessing in itself. But when being surrounded by Protestantism, it's almost like these people worship a different deity than I do. I feel the soft communist hippie Jesus. I'm like, I think that the Jesus that is represented to me in the Bible is a lot more balanced. You know what I mean? Like, it's not just it's all love, but there's also accountability, duty. There's a little bit of shame involved. All of these things exist in the Jesus that when I read scripture, they exist in that Jesus. But when these Protestants, and you tell them, like, the best question for a Protestant, when somebody starts talking about God, I live in Las Vegas. I live in modern day Sodom and Gomorrah. I do street interviews. I really push, the best cultural messaging possible, at least in my Christian belief system. But, asking these people that are Christian, ask them, did your Jesus fashion a whip? Did your Jesus in your story ever fashion a whip? A lot of them never even heard of this. They can't even fathom their boyfriend saw Jesus, chasing people out of a temple with threats, like, get out. They can't even fathom this Jesus.
This is the thing. I agree with you fully. I would have to say this. Now, people like to do this single cause fallacy and say, well, this event in history is where it all went bad. And that's how Christianity became weak. And it's his fault. And it's the Yahudim and stuff. But here's the thing. It's a variety of things. Joey, would you mind muting for just 1 second? You got some background noise.
Yes, sir. Yep.
Thanks very much. People like to come up with all these conspiracies. It's really a combination of a lot of things. You could say that some of this begins with the Renaissance, but really it goes into the Enlightenment values. I'm sorry to say, but not most, but a lot of Christians in the West, maybe bordering on majority at this point, in America in particular, don't believe in actual Christianity. And hey, if you're Protestant, I'm not just talking about the scripture, even the church tradition that a lot of you guys dislike is very patriarchal and religious and conservative, I mean. So they don't believe in that, and they certainly don't believe in what's in the scripture. So they end up believing in Enlightenment values, which are contrary, and they are kind of implanted into the Bible. So you open up the Bible, but you can't read it because you're wearing Enlightenment glasses. And so everything that you see is Enlightenment values. And they argue with Enlightenment values. And even my own people, I'm of Middle Eastern ancestry, a lot of the Christians in the Middle East are treated by the Muslims as if they're never going to do anything, and they get treated like garbage in some situations, because everybody just assumes, oh, the Christians are just Enlightenment, like Europeans, they're not going to do anything. Now in Lebanon, that situation is not quite true, because the Lebanese were always very tribal and honestly quite violent. But in some places in rural Syria and rural Egypt, the kindness of those Christians gets taken advantage of. Two Crooks, I'm going to kick you just for now so I can let some other people in. I will let you back in, though. We have some other people applying to get in. Joey, do you have any other last thoughts on this topic? I think you had some really good things to say.
Nah, man, that's basically it. Thanks for thanks, and check me out on Instagram, band.jux. Check me out.
Put your name in the live chat. And also George here says, yo, go to St. John the Baptist or St. Paul the Apostle Church in Las Vegas. Have you been?
No, that's where I go. I don't want to tell you where I go, but I go to you'll catch me at St. Paul. Yep, that's
okay. We got him, guys. I got his IP address. It's over. All right. Well, thank you very much.
all right, guys.
Please leave your social media in the comment section if you want to. Quintus Pompey, how's it going?
Salve nobiles mei, exoptate revenites canale meum, hic metatron vos alloquor. Hello, it is I, Quintus Pompeius Senecio. I'm back again.
Back. What question?
I was here last stream.
Yeah, I remember you. Don't worry, I remember you.
Alright, so are wars of conquest, are they like in what situations would they be justified in? Like, can Christians just start conquering neighboring pagan nations just to expand their land?
Yeah, so here's the thing. There have to be proper motivations. So let's say I'm the Franks and I'm in the 900s. I want to conquer land because I like the farmland and stuff. There are examples of people conquering stuff just because they want land. You can see that like in the Old Testament. There are some examples of, hey, realistically, pragmatically, we have to do X and Y. But completely annihilating and oppressing a people just to get natural resources is bordering, and not even bordering, but just going past what just war is. So just war in the Christian concept, even if you ignore St. Augustine's definition itself, is erasing evil and instead turning people to God. So, for example, the conquest of the Aztecs, Mayans, and the Peruvian civilizations would be considered moral and good because they end up converting to Catholicism and they mix with the Spaniards, etc. So a better civilization comes out of it. But if they all just got erased off the face of the earth and the Spaniards didn't convert anybody and they just took a bunch of chocolate and went back to Spain, that wouldn't be right. So what was right was them changing this place, mixing their culture with it, and then now we have millions of people who follow the Bible, more or less, in that part of the world, rather than a bunch of people who are cutting up infants and whatever. And that's not me picking on people in Latin America. My own ancestors did that. I'm sure many of yours did as well. And that's why you can't just have no religion and no morality.
Right, great. Speaking of like the hippie Jesus that those guys were talking about earlier, one of my favorite icons, like the Christ Pantocrator, I think it debunks that whole hippie Jesus idea, because on one side, you have like Jesus, his one side of the face being like calm and serene, and then the other side is like being really stern, and the eyes are piercing, like that, which represents the justice of God. And so some people can't fathom the idea of announcing judgments upon people who deserve it.
Yeah, I agree with you there, and I definitely think, I gave a couple verses earlier. You can look at all. This is to the whole audience. You can look at some of the other material I've done, but this idea that like there's even though that piece of iconography is very good, we also don't want to think there's like different parts of God. Like on Wednesday, God's going to be nice, and on Thursdays, like God is God, and everything He does is good. And sometimes to be good, you must erase evil, and that's just what happens sometimes. And so that is really what you see in the Bible. So I definitely think that people have a hard time grasping that because they're so used to hearing this love is love business and whatever else they're trying to learn, and they so emphasize love, and especially in the English language, love is kind of a one-dimensional thing. You kind of like, you love your family members, you love your friends, and you love your wife, and that's it. Whereas in the Greek, when it's revealed, there are different levels of love, and so love is not just some kind of hippie thing. And I think that language is definitely a great way to screw people up and introduce heresy to millions of people, as has been done here in the United States, unfortunately, because people are not equipped when they go in reading the Bible. They're not equipped to understand the context of what's going on. And by the time they read something or they hear it from popular media, it's already corrupted the way that they read something.
Yeah. Okay. So one last question before I go. So what do you think about like PMCs or like mercenaries, or as they are called nowadays, private military contractors?
Yeah. So for mercenaries, that's an interesting one. If you're a mercenary that signs up to an organization that you knowingly know is really just out to make money or cause terror, and you're joining that group so that you can profit it, that would be bad. However, having some kind of a foreign elite army of people who, regardless of their pay, provide a good service and help with moral armies or moral battles wouldn't be a bad thing. For example, there's the Russian military, and then there's this Wagner group that also helps them sometimes. That's not a comment on the Russo-Ukrainian war, not doing that topic today, but that's an example of there are people who are technically a private contracting group, but they're not like joining ISIS or something like that. And then you also have the French Foreign Legion as well, which is separated from the official French military. So that in itself does not seem to be a bad thing. A lot of the Crusaders, arguably, you could call them mercenaries, but they weren't joining something. Well, some of them were joining for bad reasons, but the lion's share of them were joining because they genuinely believed in this prospect. They weren't just out to rape people and get gold. So it would have to be done for the right reasons, is my answer.
All right, cool. Well, I think that's all I have right now. Okay. I'm gonna go and
Cool.
let some other guys get into the call. Okay. Salve.
All right, thank you very much. And he's gone, and his recitation is now gone. Hello, how's it going?
Hello, G.
Hey, man, how's it going? It's been a little bit. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing fine, thank you.
What did you want
So,
to comment on today?
so I would like to counter the concept of pacifism. So, with a little thought experiment, okay? So you can imagine that there are two rooms next to each other. In the first one, there is people who commits adultery, and in the second room, there is a woman who prays to God to forgive her sins. God will be simultaneously satisfied with the woman that prays to him, and not satisfied with people who commits adultery. Okay, so God doesn't jump between being satisfied and not being satisfied from one time to another. It's a simultaneous, state of being or state of reality.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. So it's not like you have two different gods, two different brains. God can have opinions and feel a certain way about certain things happening at the same time. He doesn't have to stop being pleased with a holy person in order to feel wrath towards somebody who's unrighteous, and not just like, oh, an average sinner, but somebody who's even worse than that, and they're irredeemably evil. So remember, the Christian message is that you should stop sinning. Everyone's going to sin anyway. but you should do your best to be better. And so you have people like St. Paul are redeemed. But then there are people who are irredeemably
So,
evil, and that's a different situation. Please continue.
and I would like to go further than that. And if I am wrong, please correct me, brother.
Okay.
Okay. So I would like to say that the state of being satisfied and not satisfied when it comes to God are eternal states, because God eternally knows that there are people that are going to obey Him, and there are people that not going to obey Him as knowledge, and He is satisfied and not satisfied at the current present, because there are people who obey and disobey Him, and He is going to be satisfied and not satisfied even in the afterlife, because the implications for disobedience and obedience are eternal theosis or eternal damnation. So the states of God are not temporal or accidental, they are eternal. God is simultaneously and eternally satisfied and not satisfied due to his knowledge and due to the actions of human beings and due to the future applications, eternal applications of
And
those
why,
actions.
and guys, why do we say, for some of you who don't understand the metaphysical stuff here, why do we argue with such things like that? Because God knows everything. And so if you're going to argue that you're changing God's mind and surprising him in the future, and oh, he didn't expect you to do X, Y, and Z, that would be saying that God doesn't know everything. So people get really mad at Calvinists, and obviously there's a lot of disagreement between Calvinism and the Orthodox Church. However, saying that God knows everything means that he knows everything. Doesn't necessarily mean that he's forcing you to do it, but he knows it. So you can't say that you're shocking and surprising God. That doesn't make any sense. So that's where my friend's argument has come in. Rachel is letting everybody know my book is on Amazon, and the description is in this video and on my channel as well. So you can DM me anytime about that, guys.
Buy the book, people.
Definitely.
And I would like to add another thing, Jim. Please, my dear brothers and sisters in Christ, when it comes to dealing with God, don't be afraid to approach God in a paradoxical sense. Okay? Please don't treat God as a one-dimensional reality. You know, pacifism, for me, pacifism is an implication of an ancient heresy that divides between the God of the Old Testament and the New Testament. But we worship the biblical God, the same God of the Old Testament and New Testament.
100%. Thank you so much for that closing remark. I'm going to let in Young Gamer in 1 second. So, guys, what was my friend there just talking about? That's called the heresy. Hang on, you don't want to see me. Look at the Greek Revolution. I'll be smaller. That's called the heresy of Marcionism. I devote a whole chapter of my book to it. And I'm not just here shilling my book because there happen to be people in the audience. I'm mentioning it because I don't have time to go through every single point. So you can pick that up if you'd like, or watch my previous streams on this matter. We don't think that there's a God of the Old Testament and a God of the New Testament. That's complete gibber nonsense. We don't think that God has a change of heart and decides to be nicer in the New Testament. And in fact, I'll challenge you guys right now. Show me where in the New Testament God is nicer than the Old, because I don't find it. Just because there are more elements of violence in the Old Testament, because the stories there are much different than with the New Testament, does not mean that the God of the New Testament, let's pretend we have two different books here going on, is nicer than the Old. And I'll give you a great example. In the Old Testament, God actually barters with the Judeans multiple times. So again, God knows everything, but he humors them by bartering with them, such as, oh, please, Lord, if we do X, Y, and Z, do not destroy this and that. And he gives them many, many chances. And, he sees a generation which is whoring after idols and prostituting themselves with other gods. And that is the exact Hebrew and Greek that's used, by the way, prostitution and whoring after idols. So if you see your Bible not using those words, that would be an incorrect translation. And he still gives them time to repent, even if he knows he's not going to. He wants to show them that he's willing to give them time. And even with that time, even with those extra chances, they still fail. And then they finally get punished. But they've been given a long time. Whereas with Christ, what does he say? Does he say you get 25 new chances every time you sin? No. He says you have to forgive your brother when he sins against you in a personal way. So that means my brother took away the last cheeseburger and I'm mad with him. My brother stole $500 from my bank account, so I'm mad with him. I have to forgive him. I do not have to forgive people who blaspheme God, nor do I have to love them in a way that I let them harm my community. And by community, I'm not talking about my race. I'm not talking about Chicago where I live. I'm talking about my religion. So if they're harming that, then for the greater good, I do not love that type of person. And I can't say whether they're going to go to heaven or hell. That's up to God. But if they attack me in the community, I must defend them. In the New Testament, Jesus never gives people bartering. There's not bartering. I mean, he just says, this is what's going to happen. And if you're a horrible, wicked person, like the rich man and the rich man of Lazarus, by the way, the rich man is never named because he's forgotten. Whereas Lazarus, the poor man, is remembered. The rich man of Lazarus, we don't know the rich man's name and we never will. He doesn't get a second chance. He's in there suffering. He calls out to Abraham from the void, basically, and says, Prophet Abraham, can you please dip your finger in water and put it on my tongue so I can be relieved from this death, this torture? And Abraham says, sorry, there's a great chasm, can't cross it. And he says, okay, forget me. I'm doomed. Now I realize that. Can you go to my brothers and tell them how bad this is so that they'll repent if they hear about me suffering here, right? And Abraham says, no, they already have Moses. So that kind of looks a lot more harsh than the Old Testament, where you get these chances to barter with God, the kingdom of Israel and Judah bartering with God, versus in the New Testament, can you help my brothers? Can you please warn them? No, they were already warned. Sorry. Young Gamer is going to come in now.
Hello. Hello, Jim.
Hey, how's it going?
It's been good. I just got into the stream, but I will say I think there is many issues with Christian pacifism because a lot of the West, a lot of Christians now.
Before you continue, let me make one comment before I forget. So, guys, everybody in the chat that's new here, Young Gamer is a man of Georgian origin. There was a comment left on one of the videos where you appeared in, and someone said, I forgot what he was saying. But he's like, oh, this guy thinks that if Russia was erased, Georgia would be Wakanda. I'm tired of him. He was mad at you for your comments.
Well, he's stupid because he doesn't know anything about Georgian history. I mean, whatever.
Go to let's talk about the topic anyway.
Yeah, I think the issue is a lot of people view Christ in the New Testament as this all-merciful being, but if you look at his words, he often talks about warfare, and it's a spiritual warfare, and it's a warfare on earth. He literally says that I did not come to bring peace, but to bring a sword. He tells the apostles to go and sell their cloak and buy a sword. To view God as this and Christianity as this, oh, this Muslim attacked me and they burned down my church, we shouldn't do anything.
Yeah.
We shouldn't retaliate in any way. I will say there is a precedent within conquest, I'd say, to where we shouldn't be doing extra,
I agree.
So
going
much
too
harm.
far. You don't want to go
Going too far. Like, I'm sorry to always bring it up, but with the Russian Empire and the Circassians, like, I don't think it was a proper way to try and take over them, and I think it was brutal. I don't think Georgia would be Wakanda if not for the Mongols. I think it would be like Byzantium if not for the Turks.
I know the Wakanda thing was kind of funny. So
The Wakanda thing was pretty funny.
It's always like, oh, Wakanda this, Wakanda that. I always thought that was kind of interesting comparison, but you know how it is. People always want to use those kind of things. But yeah, I think what's interesting is, and this is something we touched on earlier, there is a limit, guys. So just because you're hearing from some lunatic that you have to be pacifist and let everybody kill you, and that's the best way to create the kingdom of God on earth. And now you're hearing from my channel, actually, warfare is not always bad. That doesn't mean take it to the extreme where this is now like, let's just do ISIS stuff. That's not at all what the Christian religion is about. We just mean that if there is a threat to our community, we can defend ourselves. And if there's a horrible evil happening somewhere in the world, we should stop it. And I think within those parameters, even though it's what I just said is kind of vague, you can still accomplish quite a lot and not go too far in either case. And there's a lot of times when Christian armies have gone too far and they've been chastised for it. But the response is never, you declared war, you're a sinner. It's more like you went too far during this war. You destroyed too many people. Now you're going to alienate the very people that we're trying to convert and help.
Yeah, I think there's good precedent for this because, like, at least a lot of the Orthodox converts here in the West, a lot of them are coming back from, hardened or ardent traditionalism, and it ends up leading them to basically become ethno-nationalists for Orthodoxy, which is a massive issue.
Three Master says Georgia would be Wakanda if not for the Mongols, not the Russians. He thinks the Mongols were a worse.
Yeah. I said, the Mongols were an nation, and so were Iraq.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But like you were saying, so you think that ortho bros, meaning, and the ortho bro thing, it used to be a compliment, now it's kind of turned into a meme / insult. So when we say that, we mean people that may be going way too extreme in their online memery. So what did you say? You said that they're becoming ethno-nationalists, but with an Orthodox or whatever.
They're basically becoming ethno-nationalists for Orthodoxy. Like, Brother Nathaniel, he essentially is saying, just peddling this Jew conspiracy over and over again. And of course, he has precedent because he's a Jew and he understands these people a bit better than us. But
well, let's keep that topic.
That J word.
Just use the word Hebrew and then
the Hebrew. But the thing is, like, he ends up being like, "Oh, they're gonna replace the white people. They're gonna replace the white people," and it's like, okay, we can understand there's a racial aspect of it, but he's ending up like saying the racial aspect is greater than the religious aspect, and he talks a bit too much about race rather than the religion. Like Bible.
And another thing too, which I don't mean to just cut you off there, but I did a Substack article, guys. So I write Substack articles, and one of them I just did refutes this notion that you can make your whole identity obsessed with the Judean small hat people. There's massive problems with rabbinic Judaism, and Orthodox Christianity has never considered it a valid religion, nor do they have any love lost toward it. You can just read the history of, the history of the Cossacks and the Jews, etc. But ignoring that, the Orthodox Church does not reward Judaism a special place in the evil mastermind plan. The Orthodox Church considers the papacy and the religion of Islam to be far more relevant. So I just wanted to bring that up because people are always bringing up the Hebrew stuff, but you can become too obsessed with them and you can make that your own religion. And then the church doesn't even agree with your interpretations anymore if you take it too far.
Mm-hmm. Anyway, that's all I really had to say. It's quite late here. God bless you. Thank you, everyone. And buy James' book.
Yeah.
Also, Georgia is Wakanda.
Here we go. Caucasian Wakanda. Whatever. But, okay, so I want to take your attention to this because a lot of you guys didn't come in until halfway in. As you'll notice in this picture, this is a Greek priest, and I know it's a painting, it's propaganda, whatever, but if you just take a look at it, okay, this is a Greek priest leading the word, violent revolution of liberating Greece versus the Ottoman Empire. I have some citations from Colonel Charles Churchill in a book called The Maronite and the Druze in 1860, or like 18-something to 1860. That book's like out of print now. You can't even get it anymore. And he says specifically that the Maronites are a Lebanese tribe, and they're all Catholic, but they're a certain type of Catholic. So they're called Maronite Catholics. The Maronite patriarch of all of Lebanon and Syria said during a war where the Druze, another tribal religion found in the Middle East, were declaring war on the Christians, the patriarch of all the Maronites said, if the Druze come after us, we're going to take them on and eradicate them to the last, exempting children and women, of course. And then the Melkite, same thing, but just a Greek version of Catholics living also in Lebanon, says something very similar. He said, during this war, be sure not to hold back, spare the women and the elderly and the children and stuff, but otherwise completely annihilate your armies. And the Maronite and Melkite patriarch actually led these people into battle. And as far as I've seen, they were never anathematized for any of this behavior. And actually, Frank himself, Pope Francis, even though he gets dogged on a lot, he did end up celebrating, I don't know if it was a feast day or something, concerning Queen Isabel. So the reconquest of Spain from the Muslimin is considered canon. Even in today's Vatican II Catholic Church, the Pope has no problem celebrating these figures. So people get kind of carried away and think, Vatican II says that Christians and Muslims worship the same God, therefore everybody's going to be nice. That's not necessarily what it's saying. It's saying that per natural theology, the Muslims intend to worship the one God, but they're doing it incorrectly. So hypothetically, you can still declare jihad on them because they're not doing it correctly. And for all of history, for the most part, the Catholic Church believed that if you are not within communion of the Church, you're in the danger of damnation. There may be some exceptions, but you need to come in line with our beliefs. You can't just be some Tengri worshiper in Siberia. That ain't gonna cut it, boyo. So I'm gonna repost the well, I don't need to repost. You guys know what a pin is. I have pinned the studio chat, so you guys can come on in. We still have quite a few watchers on the wall here. So if anybody wants to join, you can. Now I'm gonna read a few comments, take a break from letting people in, let the lobby fill up. If you guys want to come in, you can. If you can't, I don't know what to tell you other than to suck an egg. Young Gamer says, I'm annoyed. This was the Georgian guy who was just on here. I'm annoyed that the racial aspect becomes overly emphasized rather than theology. Unfortunately, you're going to find that, and you're going to find it in trad Catholics as well, like the Nick Fuentes types who they think Catholicism is all about whole milk and stuff. And I mean, I hate to tell you, but like 38% of your religion's from South America, so I don't know how that works. Vigo says, Orthodox Judaism is obsolete. It's Kabbalism you got to worry about. They're heretics even to the Yehudim. I agree with that, but I still think no matter what sorcery they cock up, the Orthodox Church officially does not think of them relevant enough. Like what? That's their insult toward Judaism. Just like you guys just are not relevant enough to be the Antichrist. I'm sorry, Phil. Like, you know, you're bad and we disagree with you and we don't really care for your beliefs, but you're not big enough to be the Antichrist. So if you read the Greek historicism, oh, I totally forgot to show you guys that. This is going to be real quick, not on the topic, but I do want to show you guys. Man, Google has just been garbage lately. Anyone else feel that? This is insane. I know this website exists. I'm doing it. Don't wait. Or do wait. Okay, so take a look at this. Now, I do not condone every single word uttered on this website, just so that people are aware and they don't flip their lid and go, Gene, what about this passage here? But this website is called Neo-Historicism, and they're essentially reviving a eschatological science for the Eastern Orthodox Church. So eschatological science is a very fancy way of saying how do you interpret the future events in the Bible. So if there's prophecies about the future, or maybe they aren't about a future, maybe they were about the future back then, but they already occurred in time, what do you think of them? There's really three schools. Partial preterism, which means you think that all the stuff described in the Apocalypse or the Book of Revelation already happened except for the second coming of Christ and maybe a couple other incidents. That's held by the majority of Catholics and Orthodox, not held by Protestantism. Futurism, the absolute worst of these three, was actually invented by a pair of Jesuit priests, but for some reason, it is the primary ideology of Protestants. So when you see Baptists and evangelicals saying, well, Russia and Ukraine is the Gog and Magog prophecy, that's complete nonsense. We don't believe that this prophecy just keeps going forever. Like, oh, it didn't happen yesterday, so that means it's tomorrow. We don't believe in that. So if you're partial preterist, like most Catholic and Orthodox, you think most of those events already happened. There is no, oh, Ukraine is Gog and Magog and Putin is the beast or something. We don't believe in any of that nonsense. That just reeks of like CIA intrigue. And as I said, it was invented by a Catholic mystic. So I don't even know why evangelicals and Baptists follow that nonsense. And then the third method is called historicism, which is here. Most historicists in the 17 to 1800s were Protestants, and they were using their understanding of eschatology. It's called the papacy, meaning the seat of the Pope, the Antichrist religion. And so that was mainly held by mainline Protestants. However, in the same time period, there were a number of Greek Orthodox saints and theologians alike who wrote many treatises arguing the same thing, basically saying that inside the Book of Revelation, it did not all just happen. It's describing many things happening throughout history. So I'm just calling your attention to this because I think it's interesting, totally off topic, but it is kosher to believe in historicism if you're Orthodox. It doesn't mean you have to believe every word that's on this website. And you can disagree with me if you want. This is not one of those things that is dogmatic in the sense of you have to believe in either partial preterism or historicism. I will say you cannot be a futurist Orthodox. It makes absolutely no sense. So you can either be partial preterist, as most are, or you could lean into this side of eschatology, which I find interesting. But the point is, if you read these articles, you'll see that these neo-historicist saints in the Greek Orthodox Church have no problem saying, oh, Islam is the beast and is part of the Antichrist religion, and so they're persecuting the Orthodox Church, ergo, we have to fight against them. And by fight, it's a generic term, but still, this pacifist stuff of just doing nothing and just waiting for the second coming is, again, a modernist Protestant idea. It's a postmodern idea. We don't believe in doing nothing and waiting until Christ comes back. He is going to come back. And so things won't be perfect until then, but we do still need to do our best. The Lord's Prayer says, that will be done on earth as it is in heaven. I mean, it's right there, guys. Kind of embarrassing that people have forgotten that stuff. I'm going to check again. I'm going to give you guys the invite again because I feel like y'all have tapered down a bit. I'm going to read a few more comments. So we have quite a few good ones. Chase Young. The reason why this topic keeps being brought up is because a bunch of American evangelicals are coming into Orthodoxy and bringing their Protestant BS with them. It's not just that. There are a lot of people who are Catholic and even some people who were raised Orthodox who unfortunately believe in full-on pacifism. But you are correct. The lion's share comes from Pentecostals, evangelicals. And as I said, if you look at Nigeria, the horrible situation of a lot of Christians in the northern half of Nigeria, which is majority Muslim, none of them fight back, and that just makes them more of a mark, as one of the callers said, for the Muslimin, because they know the Christians aren't going to do anything. And historically, that was never the case, okay? So stuff makes no sense. Like even you have here, all right? This is the Anglo-Egyptian, no, it's not. There it is. The Anglo-Egyptian war against Sudan. Okay, you had the British soldiers after the Enlightenment, after the Industrial period, as recently as World War I. Winston Churchill still writes that his commanding officer said, I am a Christian, it's my duty to eradicate evil and to make societies better. And that's how they justified their war against the insane Mahdi cult that was in Sudan. So this stuff is not just from 1,000 years ago, it was relatively recently. So that's it. Yeah, this is an artistic rendition. I just used it to make my point, but I already gave you citations that in real life, priests have, in fact, led the movements. Doesn't mean they're the ones with swords or anything, but they have convinced people that fighting, even if it's the last necessity, the final necessity, you still might have to do it. Arcadius says, blaming the Judeans is blank-tard behavior. The entire foundation of the church is built by them who were the first Christians, again, meaning ethnic Judeans, not some rabbinic dude in Brooklyn today. What was I saying? There's even church fathers like St. Ephraim of Salamis who were of Jewish ancestry. Yeah, that is correct. You can't take this Yehudi conspiracy so far that anybody who has a drop of their blood is automatically evil. Makes no sense. And also, I hate to break it to you guys, but a lot of the stuff that has damaged the West have been the invention of people who they themselves have a problem with the Bible, the Old Testament in particular. So, I got the cameras open. You guys can come in if you'd like. Nobody's calling, but that's okay. Okay. It's not fair to equate the Soviet Union with Russia. Communist and Menshevik factions in Georgia were large as well. Okay, you guys are just arguing about stuff that I'm not that familiar with. These ideologies will keep evolving and fusing together in different combinations via syncretism until it comes into the ultimate final form. I would consider perennialism to be one of those final forms. So if you don't know what perennialism is, it's kind of an exaggeration of this idea that, we all worship the same God. So you could say that parts of Vatican II sound perennial, definitely. But what makes it even worse is not the Vatican II understanding, because even then they'll still say, you can read a lot of writings immediately after Vatican II, where they're still dunking on other religions. So they do still think you have to be Catholic. They just don't believe in going out of their way to conquer some random people that they don't really care about. But the ultimate perennial idea is to have everybody say they worship the same God, all religions are the same, nothing means anything, and therefore you can have no meaning and no morality, and thus Christianity becomes the main character. That's what I've feared, and that's what I've talked about before. Christianity seems like it's supposed to be the main character of the perennial religion. So they're not going to invent a new religion. They're just going to have a twisted version of Christianity, invite all these other religions, and then you're going to have a perennialized Islam. and a perennialized Hinduism, a perennialized Judaism and Buddhism and everything else, Taoism. They're all going to come in and they're all going to have this very vague, let's unite the world idea. And the Christians, whoever these fake Christians are, will be the main characters of that. That I do believe. Two Crooks, did you call back in? Well, anyway, we've got open air, so if you'd like to talk, you're welcome back.
Right. So the point I wanted to make, and I've noticed it a lot in these discussions, is that when we are talking about Western Christianity, I would argue, and to disagree with Joey, for example, I would argue that American Protestants are actually a bit all over the place in regards to warfare, because a lot of these Ned Flanders turned the other cheek type Christians who constantly use their pacifism as a form of pride, a lot of them in the same breaths, particularly amongst a lot of right-wing Republican types, is that they'll also think they need to vote for war in the Middle East like instantly. They want to give more weapons and money to Israel to like kill more Muslims or whatever. I would say they're much more over the place. They can either be in the happy middle, they can be overtly pacifistic to the point of narcissism, they can be overtly bloodthirsty and interventionist because this pastor in a megachurch told them to do so, or they can, again, simultaneously be extremely pacifistic on one hand, but in the same breath also display really unhinged behavior.
I agree 100%. Let me answer one thing real quick because the comments were coming in fast. I just don't want to forget this one, and we'll get back to the topic. Damascene says, Jim, can you explain why you think Christ didn't mean eternal damnation when he said least in the kingdom of heaven? The fathers seem to unanimously teach that the least means cast out. Yes, but there are different levels of Hades, and St. Augustine talks about this as well. So, for example, the traditional Orthodox perspective is not Dante's Inferno. We don't think that infants just go into some oven or fire or something. But people who are born without being baptized, and let's say they're a child or something, and unfortunately they don't live a long life, they would be in the lightest portion of Hades that is not anything to do with torment or anything like that. So that's kind of what I meant. I didn't mean that least in the kingdom of heaven means you're just walking around in the resurrection and you're totally cool and God has no problem with you and it's all arbitrary and some guy's higher than you and you're lower and like, what does that mean? I don't think that's what it means whatsoever. So if you were confused by that, that was my problem for not making that clear. I do think that definitely, I obviously don't deny the damnation parts that are in the New Testament. And I brought some of them up earlier as well. We can talk about that topic again in a bit. Two Crooks, as you were saying, it does seem to be that the Protestants just don't know what they're talking about because, yeah, okay, there aren't 50,000 denominations, but there are a few schools of thought. Okay, there's the evangelical thought, which pervades evangelicals and a large part of the Baptist church. Then you kind of have the like stronger, stricter, reformed, and independent fundamental Baptists, which are definitely more hardcore. They're the types who love voting for like Zionism and stuff like that. And then you have some like Lutheran and Calvinist, like ethno-nationalists who just want to blank certain people. So it's kind of all over the place. Like there's not a lot of unity, even within the main lines alone. You have extreme liberals in the Presbyterian church, and you have like some hyper-nationalist Lutheran. I mean, there doesn't seem to be any uniformity. In Orthodoxy, yeah, you might find some lazy liberal people, but they're going to be the minority where, the majority are going to at least be circled around a few belief systems that they all have in common.
Right. And at the end of the day, I would say it's about just not being unhinged with your actions, but also pretending to be pacifist with your words. A lot of the reason why I reject this right-wing, left-wing dichotomy in general is because people keep doing this. For the right-wing Protestants in America, as I said, they keep talking about how much more civilized they are than the Muslims or whatever, but they will constantly always vote to just bomb the Middle East, give more weapons and money to Israel and whatnot. And for the left, who are mostly atheists in the United States, this is a very similar phenomenon again, where they will constantly talk about how, all cops are bastards, all the military is evil, but we also need to punch people in the face because they might have accidentally said a word that they consider outdated.
Yeah, we talked about this yesterday on the universalism stream. So
yes.
If you guys want to understand what that's all about, I'm not going to repeat it here. But basically, these people don't, you can't go to all these extremes because then, you end up committing to an extreme on all fronts, which is just not the way to go in Christian theology at all. So you can't be an extreme pacifist, you can't be an extreme warmonger, and I think we've covered that pretty ad nauseum. I do want to give some quotes because you reminded me about the you're saying like a lot of people see, we got to bomb these like brownoids in the Middle East and stuff.
Yeah.
I'm just going to give some commentary. This is from my Substack article on the prophecy of Malachi and some quotes from Greece and Rome. So Celsus says, Celsus, without condemning circumcision as practiced by the Jews, asserts it was invented by the Egyptians, blah, blah. The herdsmen and shepherds concluded there was but one God, named either the highest or Adonai, or the heavenly or Sabaoth, etc. As a subsequent part of his work, he says it makes no difference whether the God who's over all things is Zeus or et cetera, et cetera. So he's kind of giving this, interesting introduction into what he thinks the Judeans are. But earlier he says many of them give themselves to the practice of conjuration of evil spirits and employ in their spells the expression God of Abraham. So he's immediately saying that they're talking to evil ghosts and stuff to kind of penalize the reputation of the Hebrews. And this is way before the rabbinics. So these are the Old Testament Hebrews we're talking about that are in line with the Orthodox Church. Another one, he says the Jewish religion is tasteless and mean because they don't allow for your multiple gods. And then you also have Cassius Dio recording Diodorus, stating that there's these completely xenophobic and mean Hebrews who defend their land and don't want to be part of their awesome cosmopolitan empire. They're uncivilized. And then you have some other quotes as well recorded by Cassius Dio about how the Sabbath is completely ridiculous and savage. And, a civilized Roman will work on Saturday. And so I just find these quotes to be interesting because a lot of people haven't seen them, but it just reminds me of the kind of similar attitude we have today, where a lot of Americans kind of think, or Westerners in general, think of themselves as the enlightened Roman Empire, but they're not religious. They think their enlightenment is like secularism or an enlightenment version of Christianity, and that everybody who takes their religion seriously is a savage. And so it kind of reminds me of that same predicament.
Exactly. And at the end of the day, it's for me just not being a hypocrite about it. If you want to be an unhinged warmonger, whether you're on the right wing or the left wing, at least wear it on your sleeve. Don't pretend you're suddenly a pacifist, except you have a trillion conditions. Either admit that there's a middle ground and that you can't completely be a pacifist, or just wear the warmonger sleeve. I don't know. And also in the comments, so Damascene is also Lebanese, and in regards to the Lebanese Arabic accent, I kind of speak it halfway with an English accent, halfway with an Armenian accent. I can't comment on that, Jim. We're just talking about the Lebanese Arabic accent being too effeminate. Is that true?
I would think in my perspective, and I'm not even close to being fluent, but from the people I've spoken to, that seems to be like a Beiruti and maybe an Ashrafiyeh thing, more like an upper middle class thing, whereas the rest of the mountain and other places in Lebanon don't have that softness. I would actually consider the coastal Alawite accent to be even softer, as a matter of fact.
Yeah.
But maybe that's just me. But I find the coastal Syrian accent to be very soft. I'm not insulting. I just, from my own experience, I think Beirut and then the coast of Syria has a pretty soft Arabic accent, whereas compared to Jordan or Saudi Arabia, it's quite a lot different.
And to the Damascene, before I head out, you said you're returning to Lebanon soon. Mind just adding where you're going to in the chat, because I have a feeling you're going to Beirut, but I want to meet other Lebanese people from, across the country. It just seems everyone from outside of Lebanon who's Lebanese is just from Beirut. I've only met one person from Baalbek.
Yeah, dude, let's do it. We'll do a Chim meetup, but not in Beirut. Yeah,
we'll get bombed or something. I don't know.
Well, we'll see what happens.
All right.
But, we can stream that. All right. Thanks for coming. I'm now gonna let Nexter. Hello, dude. What's up?
Hello.
How's it going?
Good, and you?
I'm doing good. What's your? What would you like to talk about within the parameter of topics today?
Yeah. So I would like to just ask more a question or something that you can point me to. So I understand the topic that you're talking about is kind of on more of a state level, but I'm just wondering what can I do on a personal level to not be too pacifistic or too much of an ortho bro. That's what I'm kind of interested in.
Yeah, so you don't want to go to either extreme. On a personal level, I still think that a lot of what we talked about can still be applied. Now, you're not an army, you're not a state, so you can't go conquering people. However, self-defense is scripturally permittable and even advised. And the love that Christ tells us to have for one another is always mentioned with the words like your brother, your statesman, your neighbor, someone of your people. And by your people, he means people who follow your religion. So if you're being, assaulted or mugged, especially by somebody who's not part of our religion, in which case in the West, a lot of people aren't, unfortunately. I mean, you obviously have the right to defend yourself from that, but even more so, people who are committing great evil. Let's say you have a guy that lives 2 blocks away from you, and they're doing like a mass of blasphemy, and they're desecrating a holy relic. I believe you would be perfectly justified in stopping them, or if you didn't want to get your own hands dirty, you could just call the police. But you get what I mean. Like, you're not supposed to just sit there and let evil abound. That's not what the gospel is all about.
And like, if somebody's like, let's say, fighting with you or arguing with you because you're a Christian or something like that.
Yeah. Well, yeah. What about that? I'm saying
like if a Muslim is like attacking you for being a Christian, like verbally, would it be better just to ignore them?
Well, that's gonna have to be a case-by-case basis. So
Okay.
use your best judgment. But if by attack you just mean a guy, in a calm voice, passive-aggressively trying to bait you into an argument under some dawah tent, I would just why even bother? But if by attack we mean, hey, come here, I'm gonna rip off your cross necklace and punch you because you're a kafir, that's a lot different of a situation.
Okay, thank you. That's all I wanted to know.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for calling in. What are you guys talking about? What is this? At Jeem, can you y'all have seen enough of me. Can you explain what you mean by non-denominationalism is made by the Catholic Church? Yeah, I never said it's made by the Catholic Church. I said it was inspired, in your follow-up comment, by Jesuits. So there are a handful of Jesuits who theorized the futurist eschatological science that I mentioned like half an hour ago. So this idea that the events of Revelation and a few other prophecy books in the Bible are all in the near, distant future. Nothing has happened yet. Gog and Magog is Ukraine and Russia. That all was not invented by some Baptist. It comes from a handful of Jesuit mystics from before those denominations had really become a big thing in the United States. So my point of mockery was that they all follow a Catholic-invented mysticism that the Catholic Church doesn't even consider kosher enough to believe in. It's like the refuse produced by the Catholic Church that the Catholic Church doesn't even want is what the Baptists and evangelicals take as their gospel. So I think it's completely ridiculous. I mean, the Protestants, not the Protestants, but the evangelicals and Baptists they hate Catholicism. Baptist Freemasons versus Catholic Jesuits is one of the greatest rivalries of all time in the United States, and yet they took this horrible idea from a Catholic mystic. And not just a Catholic mystic, a Jesuit who took the 4th oath. How do you believe in that? I hate Catholicism, but I'll believe Catholic mystics when they speak on matters of eschatology. Catholicism, LA, Jesuits, SWT. It's like, what? What are we even listening to here? Warhammer Imperative Forge says, just like how the monks on Mount Athos are the same Orthodox as the laity. I have a friend who claims he's Jordanian. I don't know why he did this. Yes, Saint Charbel is not Jordanian. There are a lot of Jordanian Catholics and Orthodox, believe it or not. And a substantial amount of Jordanians actually are Latin Catholics. They're not all Greek Orthodox and Melkite Catholics. The Latin Catholics in Jordan, believe it or not, were Hijazis from Saudi Arabia, the area of Saudi Arabia today. And they had moved north and they got converted by a handful of Jesuits. Most people don't know that some of the Christians in Jordan are not just Levantines. They're literally from the holy area. Well, not the holy area, but Islam's holy area, Mecca and Medina, and they were converted to Catholicism. Any Lebanese you meet named Charbel is 99.97% chance to be Maronite. There was a guy that had that name in my school in Kuwait. Yeah, like a lot of Orthodox will like Mashar as well, but he's definitely huge amongst the Maronites, and the Shia Muslims in Lebanon used to really like him too. So back before all the sectarianism and the state borders were drawn, there were reports that the Shia and the Maronites lived together in the south, and they would go to each other's like feasts and shrines and stuff. So they were on friendlier terms back then. Not today, obviously. What else we got? At Jeem, should Protestants be blamed for the current chara we are in? Hold on a second while I post something up. Now I'm forgetting. Great. Oh. I don't know. Like, what is this quote BS that we're in? Like, what are you talking about? Man, all these ads popping up. I use my computer for work, so no, I can't always do ad block, guys. Okay. You're saying they came up with all the liberalizing shite, and eventually deism, anti-theocracy, and further down atheism, then all the feces with it, like the communists. Well, I would say communism comes from some extreme Hellenic mysticism, which we've covered many times before. You can read. Karl Marx himself says he was inspired by Hellenic mysticism and the filioque when he invented equality of opportunity. So he's clearly just inverting Christian theology and shitting all over it. And then his master Hegel believed literally in a Neoplatonic emanated created order. So communism is not atheism. Sorry, guys, it's not. It's just religious. It's religious mumbo jumbo for people who don't like God. So sorry, it's over. Now you can't be a communist. But here's the thing: the deism and stuff comes from the Enlightenment. So I wouldn't conflate deism and Enlightenment, specifically with Protestantism, at its root cause, because originally, when the Enlightenment came to America, it was the upper class of people from England and Scotland who brought it over, whereas the middle class were very fundamentalist Protestants. There was a big difference, but over time these two became merged together, and pretty much every mainline Protestant church, save for maybe some of the Presbyterians and other Calvinist churches, ends up believing in Enlightenment theology, and that's why none of them are remotely religious for the most part in this country, unfortunately. The Northwest, Oregon and Washington, were mainline Protestant. Not anymore. The Enlightenment replaced that. Michigan, very, very secular. The Enlightenment replaced most of those values. Same with the Northeast. So the areas that were always the most actually religious were the evangelical and Baptist belts of the South and Texas. But unfortunately, those two sects themselves were wrought with errors. I mean. So there really wasn't a way out. And that's why Protestantism kind of derailed itself into obscurity here in the United States. This map here is just the Tsardom of Russia throughout different times and periods, and I had brought this up because people were upset. Someone had brought up, a young gamer brought up the Circassian ethno side, and obviously that would be an instance of going way too far. Pretty much everyone would agree on that. But the Russian conquest of Tatarstan, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Kyrgyzstan, etc., and Tajikistan, as well as parts of outer Mongolia, Siberia, and outer Manchuria, would all be justified in the fact that from the great steppes of Central Asia, people look at Central Asia today and think, oh, it's a bunch of irrelevant, like, dumps, who cares? It's got a low population density, yeah. But because these areas historically were never ruled by any empires, they were kind of like the Wild West. So they were the Wild East. Man, I got something in my eye. Give me a second. Oh, we're good. Yeah, now we're good. They were kind of like the Wild East. And so all manner of roaming nomads to warlords like Timur, and then, of course, the Mongols themselves could ravage everybody in greater Eurasia area. And so the Russians had just about enough after the Golden Horde. They said somebody has to conquer this land, because by leaving it exposed, even if it's a bunch of land that nobody cares about and it's like 85% empty, we're giving people too much room to just gather up random raiding parties and armies that nobody can take care of or stop. And they can just, you got the Huns, you have the conquest of Kazan, the Golden Horde, obviously, various Turkic groups. How do you think they arrived in Anatolia? They came from Central Asia. through the Caucasus and Iran, and they arrived in Anatolia and heavily mixed with the Anatolian people there. So the Russians said enough's enough. We've had enough of Tatarstan. We've had enough of these nomadic Turkic Muslim groups raiding us, and we're never going through the Mongols again. So we're conquering all of this. And again, other than the Circassians, the Russians did not erase anybody. Even the Siberians, who they thought were pretty primitive savages, they introduced orthodoxy, didn't cram it down their throats. They just said, take it if you want it. It's the best religion ever. If you don't, we don't care. Just do what you want to do in the snow. But you're going to give us some damn fur. And they did that for most of their conquests. People will complain about how they were harsh to people in Kazakhstan, forced them to drink alcohol and eat pork, but I don't think that falls under torture and cruelty in the Geneva Convention. It just is considered religious intolerance, and I don't really think that God tolerates other religions, so who cares, I guess. That I wouldn't consider that to be the equivalent of blowing up religious buildings. So complaining about pork and alcohol is definitely kind of lame. Still got a lot of viewers here, so very pleased with that. The other cheek. Oh yeah, so with the other cheek, everyone brings this one up. So two things. In the Syriac, and again, the New Testament was written specifically in Syriac, although I've compiled a great amount of evidence that at least the Gospel of Matthew and the Epistle to the Hebrews were written in Syriac. So please check out my articles and video on that topic. There's some pretty compelling evidence, and it's not a wacky conspiracy. I'm literally quoting Epiphanius and Eusebius, the church historian, Clement of Rome, I think Ignatius, and a variety of other saints who all pretty much agree that the Gospel of Matthew was originally Aramaic and it got translated to Greek. Same with the Epistle to the Hebrews, and maybe even the Epistle to the Romans was orated in Aramaic, Palestinian Aramaic, and then translated to Greek. Anyway, the Semitic or Syriac context of those verses is pretty much if somebody's giving you a slight, slap on the cheek, it's considered an insult, and you should try to strive to be better than that. So what is the message here? Don't explosively burst into violence and anger and start sawing people's heads off just because they insult you. You should be able to move on. You should be tougher than something like that. The most masculine thing in the world is not to always savage and attack people. It's to know when to pick your battles. And somebody annoying you with is not enough to cause warfare and violence. In addition to that, when you take into account a proper understanding of the rest of the New Testament in line with the Old Testament, this idea of just loving everybody no matter what isn't there. The love is mainly restricted for people who are part of the religion, could become part of the religion, or otherwise are not a direct threat to the community. People who are a direct threat to the community with no hope of being converted, we don't give them the same patience that we give a brother. All right. If we want to convert the Greeks, we try our best, but we don't want the Greeks to just slaughter everybody, St. Paul included, and then that's it. That's the end of the whole evangelization process. So there is some preference shown there, and you do base it on the situation at hand. And I think that this example of the Russian conquest of Eurasia is something that would be perfectly fine in Christian morality in terms of warfare. Seth Nemah says, communism came from Protestantism. Look up the Munster Rebellion, no property or money. I believe Marx got his inspiration from it. I also talked about the mystic bastardization of combining the Filioque with Neoplatonism, and then Hegel's Neoplatonism is definitely pretty sad. Oh, I missed a lot of comments. Sorry, guys. I wasn't paying attention. Forge from a Turkish perspective. What? Oh, Kublai Khan had an Assyrian Christian wife. Yeah, a lot of the Mongols converted to the Nestorian Christian religion early on. So in Western China, such as in Qinghai province and in modern-day Xinjiang, you can find tablets of Eastern Syriac writings in China that were from the Nestorian Church, and you can also find them in parts of northern India and Pakistan as well. They used to be massive in Central Asia. Islam just replaced Nestorianism in Central Asia. If there was no Islam, Nestorianism would probably be the second largest or even the largest Christian denomination in the world. Today it has like 2 million people. So that goes to show you the importance of understanding history. Yeah. Oh, I agree with you, Arcadius. I don't think everything the Russians did was perfect. I think they should have preached to them a little bit more and further converted some of the provinces out east. But in the long run of things, with such a low population, it wasn't as important as maintaining the prosperity of Western Russia, where 80% of people lived. Monqueux 785. What does Rick Perry have to do with futurism? Rick, I don't know why you were summoned here, to be honest. I think Imperator, just Warhammer, whatever we want to call him, summoned you, and because I mentioned futurism because someone was asking about eschatology, and I said the futurism is pretty cope. It's a joke. And we talk about the Baptists and stuff. I'm going to keep going down. Yeah, Galilean Aramaic, thank you. Some people in history call it Palestinian Aramaic, and some people call early Judaism, pre-first century Palestinian Judaism. Has nothing to do with the modern state of Palestine. And by the way, Palestine just means Israel. So I bet you guys didn't know that one. Palestine is just a Roman word for Israel, so kind of doesn't really mean anything. Is that really true, though? Well, here's the thing. Per my research, all I say is that they were inspired by a couple of kooky Jesuit mystics who were not authorized by the Catholic Church. Whereas the more extreme position would be, the Pope invented it, and it was a master plan to trick the Baptists into doing futurism. I've never said it's a master plan. What I've said is some kooky mystics that the Catholic Church denounced, for some reason, ended up inspiring a whole mystical tradition about futurism, and it just devolved into anarchy. We have a few more comments. Guys, remember, feel free to call in. I'm going to go in a few minutes, but I really like how we've had such a great we've had such a great watch time this time. So and someone disappeared. Syrian, Aramaean, Chaldean are all ultimately variants of the same Syriac language. Yeah, which is why it's kind of weird that you have this Assyrian versus Chaldean, it's like shit fest going on with the diaspora. I've only talked about that a couple times. Hello.
Am I audible?
No, you're not audible.
No.
What's up? How's it going?
I'm checking back in. I had a service that I was attending. We had, whatever, Akathist. But I wanted to mention earlier, but I had to dip out. Seraphim Hamilton has a really great video on monarchy, especially in the Old Testament. Have you seen it before?
How old is it? Because I've seen mostly more of his older stuff.
I think it's pretty recent. I don't exactly remember when it came out. That's not something.
Oh, my neck. Hey, dude, you froze.
Hello?
Yeah, just repeat the last sentence that you had.
Oh, sorry. No, my wife called me. Basically, I was just going to say, I don't know when it's from, but it's a great video. And I would really recommend it to anybody who's interested in monarchy from a biblical perspective. So just wanted to show him and say that it's a good resource. That's literally all.
I will definitely check that out. And I do need to have some more collabs on here. I just feel like that would be a good path to go. But I think we've kind of reached the conclusion of today's topic. But do you have anything else you wanted to add before I jet out of here for now?
Nah, that was basically all. I met a really salty Lebanese atheist at work the other day. I asked him if he was a Maronite Catholic, and he got pissed. And he was like, "I believe in the universe," and I just shook my head and laughed. But that was it.
Wait. I think I found it, guys. I found the Maronite atheist universe. Oh, there it is. And now it's gone. But no, seriously. That's pretty sad. The thing is, though, this is one thing I will clarify, even though it's kind of off topic. With Lebanon, it seems really schizophrenic. You either have really committed secular people that just do not like religion, or you have the super nationalist guys, or you have the religious people. But it's always one extreme. There's not anything in the middle, as far as I've seen with the people I've met.
Do you think that stems from the religious conflict in the area and the differences? Because from what I understand, the people I'm assuming, do not get along in like a Christian, quote unquote, majority country where they kind of have legislative power, but then there's all these different groups that are kind of vying for influence, and they all kind of, I don't know. I mean, obviously it gets violent at times. There's conflict and things like that. Do you think that the reaction of people who have a more secular kind of post-enlightenment mind, maybe they're into science or maybe they're into physics, like this guy was a doctor, or my dentist who is like, you should go to the mosque to learn Arabic. I'm like, hell no. He's not even a Muslim. He's a Christian, but he's like kind of, secular. It's like, do you think that stems from a kind of resentment towards the failed state?
No, not necessarily. I mean, some of it might be post-Civil War trauma that's passed into new generations that obviously weren't there. But I think some of it is also to do, unfortunately, with the fact that coincidentally, Lebanon's the most Christian country in the Middle East, but
it's also French.
Fortunately, it also got the most secularized. And so to be a Christian wasn't just like, oh, I'm a religious Christian. I'm like this Bedouin guy living in a tent, but I happen to be a Christian. It's more like, no, it's actually, to be a Christian is to be a civilized European, and to be overly religious is a barbaric Arab thing. And so I think that was a very bad identity shift that a lot of the Lebanese took. The original Maronites, before the state of Lebanon was really made, were a rural farmers people. They weren't like a coastal, I'm going to trade with France type people. The trading they did with France was mainly with the Crusaders back then. And being a tribal agricultural people, they had a high birth rate, and they were very religious. And a lot of that changed when Lebanon, the state, was made. So I think there were a lot of mistakes in how it was designed and stuff. And it changed who the Maronites were for certain. And that's definitely a problem. But the Israelis, the IDF even commented when they went to Lebanon to team up with some of the Lebanese Christians there back during the Civil War, they expected to find like these guys living in squalor, dressed like Bedouins, and they happen to have crosses on. But instead, they're like, no, these guys like drive fancy cars and they talk about how cool Europe is, and they don't like Arabs even though they're speaking Arabic. And so I think that the whole identity shift toward obsessing with the West was bad. Even Bashir Jamal, before he was killed, he said the same thing. He said the West is a man with dementia and we shouldn't depend on them. But a lot of people don't like to remember when he said that. They like to prefer that he was like this French icon or something when he wasn't.
Interesting.
Yep.
Huh. Well, I appreciate that. Do you think, I know you were saying you need to go, but I think a cool stream idea would be obviously monarchy, going over that and going over the Old Testament conception. Maybe take something from that Seraphim video and add your own,
Cool.
Bedouin twist on it. But no, I'm just kidding. But that was basically all. Appreciate the talk, and have a good night, dude.
Yeah, you too. And then we'll close out with this guy again, and then that'll be the last call. How's it going, young gamer?
Oh, sorry. What was I gonna ask?
Oh, sorry, Rick. I thought you were commenting to me. A lot of these comments I saw in the live chat are like delayed a little, but I don't know. I didn't. Anyway, young gamer, you were saying?
Yeah. So, my question is actually like regarding Orthodoxy in general. How do you think, let's say theoretically in the future, when people or different ethnicities start adopting Orthodoxy as a religion, how could they integrate their culture into this religion exactly? Because we still have traditions in Georgia which are pre-Christianity, which are still held, but they're not exactly, we'd say pagan. Like, we dog on Catholics a lot for things like the Mayan rite, but like how exactly would that play out if, let's say...
Yeah. So here's what I would say. Wait, hang on, I got one question. Jeem, don't you have time for one more? All right, dude, you can come in, but then that's it. So Christ is King, you're the last one. Yeah, so here's the thing. I think that cultural stuff that has nothing to do with theology should stay in that culture, but it has to be very, very closely analyzed to make sure it doesn't breach into just, hey, we're using this as an excuse to like keep doing polytheism. So contrary to popular belief, guys, Christianity was not just letting people worship Jotnar and Thor and stuff. They didn't compromise on a lot of stuff like that. But really, I would just say that in the future, let's say if millions of new people become Eastern Orthodox, I don't think they need to create a new rite or anything, but it would just be like a new autonomous or autocephalous church or something that's added to that. And it really just depends, because at some point, you're right, it does get a little weird saying like, hey, we're the Greek church, but we're in Guatemala. And it's like, now we're like a Greek church, but we have these native Mayan ancestors who are also speaking Spanish. And it's like 25 different identities going on at once. So there would definitely need to be some kind of accommodation, but that wouldn't happen until a serious number had converted. Now, Guatemala is interesting. I brought that up because they do have about almost 1 million Eastern Orthodox and about 1 million Oriental Orthodox converted away from the Catholic Church just in the last 20 years. So Central America is definitely going to be a place to watch out for.
Yeah, thank you very much. This is all I really had to ask for. I'll see ya. Good night. And great stream, man. High viewership today.
Yeah, that's thanks to the Crucible and my friends there. So thank you very much for the Crucible raid, guys. Christ is King, I'm waiting, man. Come on in, because like you said you want to call, buddy boy. Finrod, young gamer, is, I think he told me he was half Kazakh, half Georgian, I think. Imperator says when the French under Napoleon invaded Lebanon, Freemasonry started creeping in. Yeah, that's funny because, as a matter of fact, in the same book that I'm reading read by Charles Churchill, Colonel Charles Churchill, he says that the Lebanese were very weary and didn't want any British help whatsoever because they viewed all the British and all the Protestants as Freemasons. Here's a little tidbit you guys might not know. Protestantism for a brief 50 years grew in Palestine, and so Palestinian Christians are only 1% to 2% of the Palestinian population. But if you include the diaspora, there's probably like 800,000 Palestinian Christians in the world. 8% of them, maybe 10% or less, are actually Protestant. And I don't mean like high church Presbyterian, but they all became like Baptists and stuff. So it is, if you look on the internet hard enough, you will find bald, boomer Palestinian dudes preaching in a Baptist church. You will find it. And they will be bald, and they will be boomers. I guarantee that. So we're waiting for Christ the King. I'm going to stand for a second, right? And yeah, there is a Syriac church. The Oriental Church was growing pretty huge in Guatemala because of the lack of Catholicism there. So, I mean, that was kind of a failure on the part of that due to some local wars and whatever. So, I mean, I'm just waiting now for this dude to call in. Imperator, man, I've had the call-in button open for like an hour and a half, and I let a lot of people call in, but I said I was going to go because it seemed like the call-ins were dropping. Like there just weren't as many of them. So if I get a ton of people calling in the next minute, I'll let you guys talk. But like, I just thought it was dying down a little. Ivan. Hello, what's up? I can't hear you.
Hi, can you hear me now? Can you
Yeah,
hear me
I
now?
can. How's it going?
All good, all good. So I think this is a very interesting topic. Thank you for covering it. This is a question that I've asked myself. I'm a Western convert. I'm originally from Argentina, and I had this like bone to pick with, let's say, the way we in the West dealt with a lot of political things, especially lately. Like I'm one of those converts that converted mainly because of as a reaction perhaps to the degeneracy in the West, right? So I've read a lot of things about this topic, and the conclusions I came to were that like it's perfect to want to, let's say, flex our political muscles, but the problem that I see is that we're not there yet. Like in the sense that we need to first work on, for example, having organic communities. Like that's where I am focusing right now, like having a strong parish life, because otherwise, like what's the point of it? Like where would you disagree? What would you add?
Yeah, great comment and question. So I need to do a stream just on the topic, of community life and organic life, as you said, because one of my things I've had an issue with, I made a couple videos where I just lashed out at what I saw as just mediocre or just completely naive behavior by a lot of people on the internet. And I'm like, guys, we don't want this whole talking about theology thing just be an exercise you do when you log on to freaking Discord. This is supposed to be something where you're building a community. So you have to be, even if you're a shy person, force yourself to be a little social during coffee hour. By the way, some great food there. So now you have an excuse to go. And you can meet some great people and build a community, because when nations converted to Orthodoxy, and even if they converted to Catholicism and other denominations or even different religions, it involved real people in real life meeting each other. So I think one of the big things is definitely building community. I agree with you that politically we're not there yet, and that's because you have still tens of millions of young men all the way up to the boomer generation in America, in the United States of America, for instance, following guys like Ben Shapiro and whatever. And we're nowhere near the level of tradition we need to be. Like, we're still just a bunch of guys on a lazy boy chair making jokes about liberals. Like, this is not going to happen. Like, this is not going to work. We need to change a lot more. So I definitely agree with you. We're a long way away, and I don't like the whole naivety on the internet about we'll just convert people on Twitter. Like, that's not enough.
Yeah, or the idea that we will convert them through the sword, like we will get our Orthodox politician to like start influencing culture like at a mass level. Like,
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, what do you think about what's happening right now? Because I see what's happening right now in terms of culture in the East, or rather in traditionally Orthodox countries. Because from what I gather, they're modernizing, and the youth is already very modern in its outlook. So like, there's been like a successful cultural war waged on Orthodoxy by modern people, by post-Enlightenment thinkers. And for example, I would even go so far as to say that the war on Ukraine is basically that. So would you agree? Would you disagree? What would you say we have to do as Orthodox to remain Orthodox, even in our strongholds, even in our own like Orthodox countries?
Yeah, great question. So I'm pulling this up. This is a Reddit map, so it will be incorrect on some stuff. But just because we're talking about Orthodox countries. So this is a map of Orthodoxy. I will make one note. It does mix Oriental Orthodoxy with Eastern Orthodox, so I guess you can just ignore Armenia. But otherwise, for the Eastern Orthodox, the dark red is going to be like super majority, and the brighter reds will be a little less Orthodox. The problem, though, I brought this map up. You guys might think it's paradoxical, but the problem with maps like this is that just looking at a country and saying, oh, it's more Orthodox because there's more people who say they're Orthodox, doesn't necessarily mean it's better. There's a lot of people who say they're Christian in America, but the type of Christianity they practice is inferior compared to a more ancient type in Europe, even if in that country, like, less people say they're Christian. So what I'm trying to get at is it's better to have a smaller group that believes properly than, oh, hey, everybody here says they're Orthodox, but they only say that. So for example, in Greece, Greece is technically a like 98% Orthodox country. But in reality, there's a large amount of people who are just culturally Orthodox. And I would say Greece is one of the more modernized ones that you mentioned. I think the Greek diaspora are actually a little more conservative than the younger people growing up in Greece today. I would say that places like Romania, Moldova, and central parts of Ukraine and Georgia are probably still pretty traditional, but you are starting to see some of that modernism show up in parts of Bulgaria, Serbia, Greece, I already mentioned, like western parts of Ukraine. And so I think that the answer to this is, instead of, oh, we got to reconquer Eastern Europe, I don't think that's going to happen. What should happen is focusing on getting these teachings and traditionalism out to wherever we happen to be. I'm not in Eastern Europe, so no matter what I do on the internet, that's not going to do anything, not going to make a huge difference in somewhere like Russia. So we should focus on what we're doing here, because we have to remember, even though there's a cultural element that people keep bringing up, Orthodoxy included all of Western Europe and a large part of North Africa before 1054. So we can't just say Orthodoxy is like this like cool minority hidden religion. This is for Greeks and Russians and stuff, because it was okay to say that right after communism fell, right after the Soviets were gone, because it just came back and it was like, hey, this is fresh and new. It's been a few decades now. It's time to buckle down and focus on conversion. So I know that the Orthodox Church is growing a lot in Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, Rwanda, Burundi, DR Congo, and parts of Nigeria, as well as Central America. And I think that the West needs a rejuvenation of that as well. So that would be my advice. Focus on what we're doing in our areas, and I wouldn't focus too hard on like, oh, the Russians got to clamp down on modernism. In my opinion, you should let the young people get some of this nonsense out of their system, because if you try too hard to, be claustrophobic and suffocate, they're just going to lash out even further. So it's almost like, play it by ear would be my recommendation for now for those countries. But they're different, each one. So really it depends. And again, like Russia, as you guys can see, is a huge country. Parts of it are more religious than other parts. So it's not all atheist, but it's not all Orthodox either.
Okay, so I have a follow-up question. We usually hear from a lot of people that, let's say, want to give us like a quick and easy answer to, like, for example, where should we go? Like, where should we choose to live? It's a very American issue in a sense, because Americans are very used to relocating, at least within the US. And there have been, let's say, a few attempts at creating Orthodox communities. Specifically, I'm thinking about, for example, a project that is going on Montana, that I think they're trying to make like a let's say a bastion for Orthodoxy around a few monasteries and such. And do you think that is a legitimate way to approach the issue? And if it is, where would you say we should congregate? Where should we like gather into, let's say, to strengthen ourselves in our faith? Because honestly, when you're a new convert, the best thing you can do is to be around holier people than you, so that you imbibe the phronema. But once you're already developed, then you're strong enough in the faith to go wherever and to evangelize other people and not be, let's say, pulled down by themselves. So what do you think we should do? Should we collect? Should we disperse? Should we stay where we are?
Well, here's the thing. Let me get rid of that. I thought it would look better. But what I was going to say is we don't want to only be in one area. So one thing that Redeemed Zoomer said that I agree with is that conservative people, no matter who they are, shouldn't like be dying to escape the big cities. Because the problem is when we have too much of a divorce between here's where liberal people live, here's where conservative people live. Well, most people aren't super conservative or super liberal. They're going to fall in the middle. So we don't want to just like give free places to liberalism and watch people become more secular. So I think that we should strive to have a presence in a lot of areas. But if you're creating a community, that's a little bit different. Let's say you're like me. All my family's here in the downtown Chicago area. I'll probably be here for the next while at least, maybe not forever. But I intend to take advantage of the fact that there are some good communities here. There's Ukrainian, Greek, OCA, Russian, and Antiochian churches here in Chicago. So there's a good diversity there. And that can be definitely a good thing because it exposes people that may not have ever heard of Orthodoxy and they don't know anything about religion at all, really, to something brand new. So that's definitely one aspect. And then the only thing with building a community that I would be careful of is you don't want to rush into like a cultic idea. So you don't want to go too far into, actually like here. Oh, sorry, Warhammer. I thought you were going to mention the cult thing with Vatican Catholic. But like Vatican Catholic, the Diamond Brothers created their own cult where they have like some trailers and it's their monastery. So I would definitely say like let's avoid something like that. We don't want to be like I can't even name some of the stuff, but the point is you can get into weird territory and you can risk alienating people and making Orthodoxy look kind of weird. So that's not me shooting on rural areas. Basically, my answer is we should take advantage of both. If you like rural areas, you should set up a good community, but just don't be like weirdos who don't want to associate with the rest of the world. And if you happen to live in a big urban environment, then you should focus on displaying that and getting people involved. That's what I would say.
Okay, and a follow-up question on this. I'm sorry if I take too much of your time, but
go ahead.
There is a point in which the political and the personal touch especially when we're talking about community. And what we're seeing right now with the surge of new converts, which are mostly, let's say, young and male, is that let's say that there's a lot of frustration in terms of, let's say, the way that the culture around them is. There's a frustration in terms of even, let's say, sexual dynamics. There's a frustration in terms of economics, in the sense that let's say when you're part of a society that is corrupted, when there is a lot of exploitation, you are, let's say, robbed of the opportunities that would be accorded to you for your age, right? So there are a lot of young men who, let's say, see a bleak outcome in terms of financial possibilities to even like start a new life. Don't even think about like finding an Orthodox wife. Find a wife. Like they don't see themselves as being able to let's say move forward into the future because of, let's say, economic restrictions that are being imposed upon them. So they see in that an urgency to, let's say, change things politically in order for them to be able to, let's say, make a life for themselves. What would you suggest them? What would you suggest they should do?
Yeah, great question. So I'm glad you brought up economics and finance, because a lot of people don't realize that that is the motivation for quite a lot of people. Some of the most extreme people you'll see either, live with their parents, and so they have no skin in the game. And hey, there's nothing wrong with that if you want to save money, for sure. But if your goal in life is to never be employed and just sit there and talk to people on Discord, that would be a pretty bad thing. And so a lot of those guys end up being the most extreme. But then also, you can't say that you want to change the whole world just because the situation is not working out for you. What I would say is to change some of your expectations. So, for example, I think life actually goes by pretty fast. Life can be kind of short. I would get a degree, or if you already have a degree, I would maybe get a minor or something in something that you really like. That also makes money. But I would definitely prioritize enjoying the work over just going after dough. Because I took the opposite approach. When I was younger, I'm like, all right, I'm just going to get whatever makes money. Ended up becoming kind of miserable, not really wanting to do that work and not enjoying it after a few years and feeling like life's just withering away. So I changed course on that. I would recommend people to not be so caught up in what everyone else is doing. If you want to have a simpler life, you don't necessarily have to go and get some business degree and do business like other people. You can do something much different than that. So I would just focus on, if you're young and you're a dude, live cheaply. Don't spend a ton on rent if you can avoid it. If you want to live with your parents until you're like 26 or whatever, save some money. There's honestly nothing wrong with that. Save some money and then just kind of enjoy your life and piece by piece get things together. I wouldn't be in a rush to get like a LARP wife. I would just look for someone that you're compatible with. And then I think that a conversion will come out of that like very faithfully. Because when you're going after someone whose whole identity is I'm a LARP, I'm this, like I'm your special wife on the internet or whatever, they might not believe in that forever. That might just be a phase. So go after someone that you're really compatible with, in also on moral grounds. And then I think they usually would end up converting anyway. I mean, that's been my experience personally. But guys, I wouldn't worry so much about, hey, I'm 20, I need to find a wife and have kids right now. There are a lot of people in history way before our time period with technology that did not have kids when they're 20. There's not a huge rush into that. But just, you should have kids. If you're going to be married, you definitely have to have kids. But make sure that you have those things in order and then do them properly. That's what I would say.
Excellent. I wish you could do like a whole stream on those things, like developing them, because like I've wrestled with these things myself in the sense of let's say how rigorous should I be, for example, when prospecting I know it sounds awful, super unromantic, but when prospecting a potential candidate, it's like should she be a saint? Should she be super hot? Should she be like super educated? Should she be smart? All those stupid things that one can think of. And the thing is, I'm leaning more towards what you're saying in terms of let's say having a compatibility in terms of values. But the thing is, orthodoxy, I think, is fundamentally inextricable from let's say values, right? So what would you say are compromises that you can do in terms of, let's say, not compromises in terms of, let's say, your faith, but rather in terms of keeping the peace? And what do you think is a fertile enough ground? Because, for example, there are a lot of Protestant girls that are simply bad, and there are Protestant girls that are fantastic.
Yeah.
Like it's hit and miss. So what should you look for in a wife? What's your
Yeah. So I think you froze for a second, but yeah, or maybe it was my internet. So basically, I'll just give you my story real quick, and then I will actually do a whole stream on this whole topic of dating economics. Great idea. So everyone thank Ivan for that idea. We'll do a stream on that. But for me personally, I actually ended up getting, talking to and meeting a woman that I know based before I had come into any of this stuff. And so when I had discovered it and began to not just like theology, but it's religion overall, learning the Bible, learning the scripture. What's an Orthodox? What's this? Oh, I was baptized Catholic. Hey, what's the difference between that and Orthodoxy? And just discovering this stuff. I did all that with her. So she was by my side when I was coming through all that, and we kind of grew together with that. And she originally was not an atheist, but she was agnostic, grew up in a home where this stuff was never talked about. Whereas with me, it was more of a cultural thing with my family. They weren't like super crazy. I don't want to use the word crazy, but they just weren't super serious about religion, but they did enforce like, hey, you're going to do your sacraments and you're going to go to the feasts and stuff, and you're going to go to a Catholic church for elementary school, but they weren't very serious other than a few members of my family. And so I kind of grew with her in that. Now, if you're already Orthodox, I'm not saying like pretend you're not Orthodox and then like trick her. That would be foolish. But I wouldn't say no to getting in a relationship if you're Orthodox with, let's say, an evangelical or a Baptist who's very, very serious about their religion, because that can be translated to someone who becomes very serious about orthodoxy. Whereas if you just go, hey, I need my super trad wife from Europe, you might not have anything in common with them. And then for them, orthodoxy might just be a cultural thing. So they're not going to have the passion that you have. So I think it's better to take someone that you are more compatible with, and then you guys can move downstream in that direction over time. And I don't think it has to be like a trick or like brainwashing. It's just something that can naturally happen. That's what my advice would be. I would definitely say, in terms of other relationship stuff that I'll mention now before I go, that a man should definitely needs to know how to be firm. And when I say firm, I don't mean mean, because there's a big difference. A man just needs to know how to be firm when dealing with women. I'm going to leave you guys a piece of advice. In the medieval period and throughout most of Christian history, everybody, including the church fathers, assumed that women were the more sexual ones and that men were the more innocent ones. So like today we have the opposite. Like if you ignore TikTok and Snapchat and stuff, for a lot of the history of the modern West, we all think women are like the pure innocent blank slate and men are like these barbarians who just want to like have sex with everybody. But historically, the Christian church has said, no, the women are the more sexual ones. So you have to be able to, number one, control them, and number two, impress them. I think that a lot of men struggle with that because they think of women as like buddies. It's like, man, it's just a man who's beautiful. It's like, it's nothing like that. So man just needs to learn how to be firm, and that doesn't mean being mean. You can be a goofball around your woman, but there's certain things where it's like, hey, you gotta learn to be strong on some stuff. Kind of long answer, sorry about that, but that would be my advice for that so far.
No, thank you a lot. Before you end this stream, can I shield something, and can I ask you to let's say to like consider perhaps having a longer conversation on these things, because I actually have like a small YouTube channel. I'm not even creating content anymore, but it's all on these kinds of topics, and like I would really like to talk with you a little bit more on these things. So
let's do another talk sometime. If I do a stream on this topic, then we can you can do like a cross stream with your channel if you want, for example. And then I don't know when I'll do the stream on this topic. Might be in a week, might be in a few days, but I'll let you know ahead of time. And guys, one comment for the comment section. Like, I like that people are talking, but can we not do like, what is this like ethnic war about some Turk? Like, what are you guys even talking about? I mean, what is this stuff? Let's keep the hey you Turk stuff out of the chat. I mean, anyone's welcome to talk, but I don't know what is even going on. Anyway, thank you very much, Ivan, for the ideas, and leave me your information when the stream's done. Leave me a comment on the video, not the live chat, because it's going to disappear anyway. And then we'll get into contact.
Fantastic. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no problem. All right, guys. Thank you very much for tonight's stream. I'm gonna get this old 2009 like Hell's Kitchen promo picture out here. I love Hell's Kitchen. You guys should watch that. Can we marry people from East Jalalabad? I guess. I mean, like, I don't. What kind of question is that? It's like you can marry some tribe from Madagascar. I don't really care. Like, as long as you guys are believing together. And then remember, St. Paul also says that I don't know what you guys are talking about. Like, some of you guys are crazy. Like, I don't even know what to say. What was I mentioning? Now you made me forget. I did have something I wanted to say. This is really gonna mess with me now. Oh, I hate when that happens. Well, anyway, that's it. So I'll do another stream soon, and then thank you all for, if you're new, please like, comment, and subscribe. Put a comment at the end of this video because the live chat is dying, and it will die, and it's over. If I've missed your comment or went off the deep end, my apologies. The stream went way longer than I thought it would, but we ended up getting a raid from the Crucible, so shout out to my friends from the Crucible. Check out the Crucible YouTube channel, as well as discussions on the Crucible Limited. And check out Rachel Wilson and Andrew Wilson on X, since they helped with the Crucible raid. And you don't have to agree with everything that they say. You can disagree. That's why they have a debate platform. So I definitely encourage people to hang out with people that they may not necessarily agree with. And I did want to add, St. Paul says that a man can marry a pagan woman so long as the pagan woman does not impugn his religion, affect his religion, or do blasphemy in their household, with the attempt that she would eventually become a Christian herself. So do remember that. I'm going to now put the final closing video on, and then that's it. So let me add that right now.
Freakiness is a part of life. Original Baramonga along with the two bad, wicked youths of rap. Heresy, whoa.
What's the business? Talk paper when I'm riding by. They know it's drizzle, he the truth off the east side. I know who ain't got my money because they ducking high. I grind for me and mine. I got the green light. I got to get it how I live it. That means front line. I got them zips, I got that soft, I got that hard white.